Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto Was Not the Son of Minato and Kushina. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
Crash. A giant nine-tailed fox appeared and began to rampage around the shinobi village of Konoha, destroying everything in its path as shinobi started to pour out of the village to battle the monstrous demon. Unbeknownst to the shinobi of the village, another battle was taking place on the outskirts of the village on the opposite side. A young boy who had the power to change the world, just not the one he was in, was brought into the world. "Get away from her!" yelled a young man at the figure that had suddenly materialized, crouching next to his wife as she held her newborn son to her chest while the figure attempted to remove her dying hands from it. As though addressing a disobedient child, the figure reprimanded, "No, this child will change the fate of the world, and I refuse to let you have him." He turned, just avoiding the man as he flashed in his direction. The man turned to his dying wife and said, "I refuse to let you take my son from me before I can even hold him once in my arms." As Minato's tears fell on her, the dying woman gasped, Minato, I don't think I'm going to make it much further. But, just promise me that you'll take care of our son." The figure tensed at the mention of Minato's name, and she responded, "Of course, I'll protect him to my dying breath, just as you have Kushina." Before his power erupted, the figure muttered, "Kushi-kun. No, I refuse to lose her," he exclaimed as he flashed back across the room, colliding with Minato as the two men crashed through the wall. A piece of the man's orange swirl mask chipped off as they flew through the air, letting a strand of hair fall out. Minato's eyes widened as the figure tilted his head and their eyes met. "That jutsu, was that the Hiraishin?" Minato gasped. Minato sprinted in the direction of the figure, determined to put an end to this altercation immediately. "You have the Sharingan, so you must have sent the fox to the village," he cried. The figure muttered, "Jutsu? Sharingan? What a strange place she found her way to." Minato inhaled deeply before yelling, "Rasengan!" as a tiny blue ball materialized in one of his hands and he pushed the attack into the figure's body before it passed through him. The figure held out one hand and a ball appeared in it, asking, "Crap, I'm running out of time, I'm starting to pass back into Earthland. And, Rasengan, you mean this?" Before vanishing and flashing above the figure, holding an even larger Rasengan in one hand, Minato yelled, Who are you? To be able to use that jutsu without being taught it is nothing short of a prodigy." He then slammed the attack into the figure, causing his back to nearly tear as he hit the ground. Minato flashed away, gathering Naruto as he rushed into battle against the Kyuubi, saying, "Now then, to stop the Kyuubi. I'll need a newborn to seal it into so. I'm so sorry Naruto for the curse I'm about to inflict upon you." The figure laughed as he got to his feet before phasing between the two worlds once more. One positive outcome of this, though, was that the brief flash reset his body, fixing the damage down to his back. "Haha, I thought he would never leave. It feels so strange, his aura is nearly identical to mine, which I suppose is a plausible result considering in a sense he is me." Focusing ether to his feet, the figure turned back towards the building and flashed back to Kushina's side, saying, "Now then, first order of business, save Kushi-kun." Kushina let out a rattling gasp and the figure grabbed her hand. "Oh, Kushi-kun, how I've missed you. Now I know why my aura was crying out for me to come to this world, to save my son, and now I will save you as well," the figure said. The figure focused his magic to form a portal back to Earthland before freezing, saying, "Crap. You used the last of your magical energy to call out to me. You're out of magic. I'll have to leave Naruto behind for now so I can get you back and replenish your energy in Earthland." As he considered his situation, the man thought, "But, if we leave, I'll have no way of ever finding this world again. So, I'll have to abandon my son or let my wife die, how fun." Before plunging through the portal and into his home world, the figure said, "That fox, what's his name? Oh yeah, Kurama. That man said that he was going to seal him into my son, so as long as I have his key, then I should be able to summon them to my world. Okay, that's the plan, now to put it into action." 5 years later, with Naruto escaped the crowd that was pursuing him across the village by turning down an alley. Tonight's moon was full, and there was a sense of magic in the air as Naruto clambered over a fence and fled in the direction of safety, the Hokage's mansion, or Jiji as Naruto usually called him. He turned around and saw an irate villager, gasping as he had taken a wrong turn and ended up at a dead end. The villager yelled, "I got him, he's trapped over here," and more irate people started to move toward the 5-year-old blonde in the alley. As Naruto was skewered with several blades and then knocked against a wall as blows rained down on the helpless blonde, cries of, "Kill the demon," started to rise. Then, suddenly, two figures emerged, a redhead that many men and some women gazed at with desire. The other figure was somewhat more recognizable. It was a man with blonde hair that appeared to spike outward in all directions, dressed in a full-length black trench coat. His typical orange swirl mask was pulled over his face. The redhead's words, "Get the hell away from my son before I show you a real demon," were the final words Naruto heard before he passed out. In the mindscape of Naruto, water was dripping onto Naruto's head when he woke up. He groaned as he opened his eyes and saw a huge fox sitting in front of him, separated from him by the vertical bars of a cage. Even though it sounded more like a whisper to the fox, Naruto still looked down to greet the child. Hello. The giant fox said, "Hello, Kit. I was wondering how long it would take before you found a way in here. Let me tell you, it gets pretty lonely in here. Oh, 5 years is too long to be away from home." The fox then smiled in a foxish manner and went on, But where are my manners? Mom always taught me to introduce myself first. My name is Kurama, and it's a pleasure to be working with you. Now then, I suppose that is all the formalities out of the way, so if you don't mind, piss off." The fox then vanished into the cage's dark shadows. Standing in front of the bars of Kurama's cage, Naruto said, Wait, my name is Naruto, and could you please not leave? No one has ever been that nice to me before, and I would prefer if we could be friends, Kurama." As he curled up on a gigantic bed, Kurama said, "Kid, you do realize that you're asking an entity regarded as a demon fox to be your friend?" After responding, Naruto shrugged his shoulders and entered Kurama's cage. "Oh well, you made some bad choices. You never hurt me, so I don't see you as a demon." Kurama muttered glumly, "Kid, you don't seem to get it. That crowd and every crowd that has tried to kill you, all the shopkeepers that overcharge you or ban you from entrance, they do all that because of me. Because I killed their families, and I destroyed their homes. I destroyed their peace." Then he heard a loud, booming laughter coming from the young blonde, who now had a sinister smile on his face. "So what, Kurama, so you killed some people and destroyed some property. I want to kill them all for what they did to me. You didn't do it. You just sat quietly in your cage all alone, knowing that you couldn't do anything to protect someone from being blamed for what you did. Well, guess what, Kurama, from now on, we stick together, and kill anyone in our way." Naruto giggled as Kurama's eyes widened attitude shift. Kurama asked, "What happened to you, Kit?" and got a look that should have been clear. Before back-flipping out of the bars and reverting to his normal demeanor, Naruto responded, "This is Naruto's mental representation, Kurama. Notice that since I'm in the cage, it suppresses your urges and influences on me. This is what I would be like without you, an arrogant crazy who wants to kill everyone. So you aren't a demon to me, Kurama. You an angel. You're what keeps me sane." Naruto then sat down and started talking to Kurama. They were both totally oblivious to the mayhem outside. Exterior. As Kushina yelled, "Get the hell away from my son before I show you a real demon," the still, growing crowd gasped. One of the front-line civilians yelled, "You're the demon's mother? We're going to kill you, but not before we rip you a new one," and there were applause. As she crouched, 9 blood-red tails protruding from her back and a single sharp canine now visible over her lower lip, Kushina said, "Fine, you asked for it now. Ripping is something I can do wonderfully." She then flashed forward through the crowd, which exploded in blood as Kushina literally tore the attackers to shreds. Before Kushina spun around and executed an uppercut with her sword, catching the rim of his mask and sending it flying, the figure remarked, "Now Kushina, entering chaos mode wasn't necessary. I mean, come on, if their leader can't even put a decent dent in me with what I presume to be one of his better moves, then these low-level civilians certainly don't warrant chaos mode." Before a second sword materialized in her hand and she proceeded to slaughter the crowd, Kushina screamed, "Shut up, Minato. I'm well within my rights to be angry. I almost lost my son to this homicidal crowd. I mean, does that look like an hour-old baby to you?" Before flashing behind her to deflect a blow from a man with a cigarette burning in his mouth, Minato yelled back, "Well, I'm sorry that I didn't account for the differences in time warping. And how the hell was I supposed to know that my other self would split Kurama into the yin and yang portions, and only seal the yang half into Naruto?" Minato quickly reacted by covering his face with another mask before putting his hand on the man's chest, just above his heart, and slipping it inside his guard. Minato uttered the words, "Or a siphon," and then withdrew his hand, removing a tiny ball of wind with it before dropping it into his mouth. Minato muttered, Air magic, huh? Well, I thank you for your donation. Now," as he lowered one hand and a circle manifested before it. The man jumped back when he saw this, and with good reason. Minato's tornado guard attack was called out as the wind started to swirl around the two, shielding them from oncoming attacks. Minato sensed additional figures encircling the two on the opposite side using his magic. As Minato noticed one of the older figures making strange hand gestures, he remarked, "Well, Kushi-kun. Looks like chaos mode may be warranted after all. We're surrounded and judging from their amount of, what did you call it?" As she witnessed the older figure creating seals with his hands, Kushina responded, "They call it chakra. It's kind of like their version of a Thernano, which they have to channel through the use of hand seals." "Okay. Well, judging from the amount of chakra they have, they're significantly more powerful than the rank grunts. Also, that older one's aura is similar to the guy the first just knocked back. If I had to guess, I would say that they were father and son. So, what do you want to do? If we time it right, we might could get to Naruto and get through the portal before they catch us. On the other hand, they seem to recognize me as the worst threat since I can do long range and close combat, so if I go further into the village I might be able to draw them away while you get Naruto and get out of here. I think that would be smarter since I'm faster than you," Minato said, and before Kushina could retort, the man who finished his seals as they charged at the swirling the air. While the group pursued, Minato pushed Kushina aside and headed in Naruto's direction. Kushina then gathered Naruto from the ground and hurried to catch up with Minato. The group landed around Minato as he landed in a more open area, and the old man started talking. "I don't know who you think you are, but it is my duty as Hokage to capture and execute anyone that attacks my village," the Hokage said, charging at Minato, who just laughed as Kushina appeared. He turned to her, mumbled, "Aura walk," and vanished to her side, surprising everyone as they turned to watch him take off his mask. Minato screamed, "Goodbye world, and thank you for taking care of my son." Suddenly, a portal materialized beside him, and he, Kushina, and Naruto disappeared into it as the group collapsed to their knees. 1. A young man with silver hair that seemed to gleam like milk in the moonlight and defied gravity, asked, "Did we just pick a fight with the fourth Hokage?" As they all wished Naruto luck wherever he ended up, against Konoha, alongside it, or, best of all, far away in some foreign land where you would never have to see the traitorous village again, one of the masked figures remarked, "I don't know, but what I do know is that he specifically just called little Naruto his son." With Naruto, with his head pressed against both a soft and a hard surface, Naruto's eyes opened to the bright moon above him. On his right, he turned his head as little as he could and saw a gorgeous woman with long flowing red hair and creamy skin, as well as a man who appeared to be an older version of himself, with angular features and unruly blonde hair that were probably the result of years of intense and demanding training. The two's eyes opened as he squirmed around, looking down at their happy bundle. Naruto wriggled out of the woman's grasp and she said, "Oh, good night." As Kushina giggled, Naruto uttered the terrifying words, "Who are you? I saw you earlier, and no one ever hugs me, so who are you and where am I?" A thump cut off Kushina's childlike laughter as Naruto passed out. "You mean to tell me that you don't recognize me, Databane? I'm your mother, this is your father, and welcome to Fury, a magical land," Kushina exclaimed. Naruto looked at the bright sun, his eyes opening and then squinting. He groaned as he sat up, his shoulders hurting from spending the entire night on the ground, and his back popping. To be honest, it shocked him because he had spent roughly 3 of his 5 years of life sleeping on the ground before Gigi got him an apartment, but even then, he still spent a lot of nights on the ground because the Konoha villagers left him for dead. As he yawned, he searched for his parents but couldn't find them. He then looked downcastly at the ground while a familiar hollow sensation came from his chest, where his heart was beating lightly. Naruto muttered, "Great, another one of those dreams. Why'd I always fall for that? My parents are dead, the sooner I accept that, the better off I'll be." Then tears started to fall from his eyes, but something gentle wiped them away. When he opened his eyes, a vulpine fox the size of a bicycle, who was snickering at the sniffling blonde, met his bright blue eyes with crimson red ones. Before turning around and heading out, Kurama said, "Oh, come on, I mean Naruto. You think we and you becoming friends was a dream? Well, if you want to go back to our previous arrangement, then fine. I don't need a friend who cries as much as you." Naruto then grabbed one of his tails and climbed on his back. As Kurama stiffened his legs and ran across the open plain toward the tree line, Naruto sniffed, "No, ISTI. Still want to be friends, Kura-sama. So, does that mean that those two really were my parents?" Before leaping over a log in his path, Kurama responded, "No, Naruto, they're your parents. They just decided to let you sleep outside since you looked so content, and they are currently in their house, which is where we are headed." Naruto said, "Hey, Kurama," and then ducked under a low-hanging branch. After responding, Kurama veered around a group of trees and said, "Yeah, Naruto." As the two of them approached the edge of a gigantic lake, Naruto exclaimed, "Last night, you mentioned Fury. Then, Chan said that this is fury. So well, number 1. How did we get here? Also, this is your home that you missed? He then let out a terrified gasp. Before jumping into the air and vomiting into the lake as a tiny ball fell out of his mouth, Kurama responded, well, on the first order, I have no idea because number 1, we don't share senses at the time, and now we can't, and number 2, you were unconscious, so I wouldn't have seen or heard anything. He worked rapidly, bringing one of his tails to his mouth as a sphere formed on the end, then swallowing it as his tails started to spin, carrying the two of them across the lake to a small, two-story house on the other side. And on the second thing, yes, this is my home that I longed for. It truly is beautiful, isn't it? Kurama said. As the fox landed, Naruto repeated, hey, Kurama. The fox then ran into the yard like the family dog. Kurama gave a loud yip and responded once more, yes, Naruto. As Kushina left the house and gathered up her son, cradling him in her bosom, Naruto innocently asked, last night, weren't you trapped in that cage, and, like the size of a mountain? And, oh, you said something about working with me, what did you mean? Kurama slithered off into the house as Kushina carried Naruto, who was holding her like a life raft, inside and remarked, well, those questions could be best answered by your parents while I go and find my foxier half. Minato, Kurama brought Naruto back, exclaimed Kushina as Naruto sat in an easy chair and kept sobbing into her top. Upstairs, Naruto heard a loud thumping, and then the source of the sound slammed into the doorframe and cursed. Minato finally descended the stairs and stepped into the room, sighing as she collapsed into another chair. As Kushina glared at Minato, he muttered, so, this is my son huh? As Kushina intensified the glare directed at her blonde husband, Naruto gasped in between sobs, Chan, San, if I'm you. Your son, then why did you leave me for so long? As her son turned slowly to face his blonde father, Kushina whispered to him, because, Sochi-kun, someone decided to live up to the stereotype of their hair color. After escaping his mother's hold, he dashed to the restroom, got up on the counter to look in the mirror, started crying again, and then ran back into the room to punch his father. Before jumping back into his mother's arms and cuddling up to her warmth, Naruto cried out, you gave me your stupid hair, now I'm going to be an idiot like you, sob. Why couldn't I get Chan's hair, it looks cooler than yours. The older blonde was crouching in the corner, surrounded by a dark aura, when Kushina stuck her tongue out at him. Kushina picked up Naruto and carried him to her room, leaving her now emo husband to brood. Oh, Minato, not the depression aura again. The last you used that you sent an entire village into a suicidal spree, and you remember the time before that, you caused that boy to murder his family. Kushina put her little blonde down as he sniffed and then went to the bathroom to clean himself again. Okay, first order of business is to get you into something more clean. I suppose you will need a bath first though, so, hurry up, K. He returned to his parents' room after cleaning himself, where his mother was reading a swordplay book in the corner. The fact that Naruto was still too young to comprehend modesty had nothing to do with the widening of her eyes as she looked at her son. His youthful body was covered in numerous scars, including letters scribbled into his flesh, demon and pain symbols, and burned tissue surrounding his legs. As his skin was drawn up, most of his ribs were exposed against it, and the joint in its socket made a barely perceptible click with every step. Minato ran after Kushina's yell, honey, why do you look like that? As he crashed into the doorframe in his hurry. Naruto tilted his head and said, what do you mean, Chan, I just took a bath, is it not normal to do it without clothing? His neck cracked loudly. The young blonde winced as Kushina prodded his bare rib, saying, no, honey, that is normal, I was referring to this. Naruto gave an honest response before stroking the soft fabric of the clothing Kushina laid out for him. Oh, well, the villagers always overcharged me for food, so I had to eat the expired things so as to prevent me from starving to death. The rotten food always made me throw up everything, so I never really got much food to stay in my belly. As he left to make lunch, Minato remarked, okay, I take it back. Chaos mode was a much-deserved punishment for the village hurting our son like they did. With Kushina's eyes brightening as she prepared to introduce another person to the wonderful ways of ramen, Minato inquired, hey, ramen okay for lunch? As Kushina responded, of course, just add extra vegetables to Naruto's bowl. Naruto watched in confusion. Chan, what's ramen? Was the question on Naruto's mind as Minato left. The mother responded by squeezing her child and murmuring, you poor, deprived thing. To have never experienced the perfection of ramen is like to live without any parents. Both of them went into a deep depression before Kushina started assisting Naruto in putting on his clothes. With a gesture toward a small, extended sphere that appeared to glow with iridescence, Kushina said, "Okay, Sochi-kun, this is a color wheel." As Naruto nodded and touched the wheel before his clothing turned purple, Kushina went on to explain, "Just put your finger on it and think of the color you want and it will change your clothes to that color, understand?" Naruto joyfully exclaimed, "There now my clothes match your eyes, Ka-chan." Kushina blushed at her son. She felt she didn't deserve a son like him even though he had only been here for a day. Kushina smiled at her son and gestured to the next section, thinking, "He should be upset at me for everything but all he does is try to be like me." Kushina said, "And this wheel up here will adjust your hair color since you don't seem too happy with it." Naruto touched it joyfully before turning red and rushing to the mirror, where he started to scream and cry once more. Naruto screamed as a voice came from the bed, "Ka-chan, I thought of red, but my hair turned orange, now I look like even more of an idiot and I look like a strawberry." A fox that was a little smaller than Kurama asked, "And what is wrong with orange?" Naruto covered his mouth, turned to face the newcomer, and responded. Before the fox huffed, Naruto remarked, "Nothing is wrong with it, Kurama, I just want my hair to be red so I'll look cool." The fox said, "Whatever, no matter what you do, you still look like a gaki to me." Naruto gasped as another one landed next to it. Naruto laughed as Kushina turned the wheel to red. "Oh, shut up Kanari, you're just pissed off because I want to get back together, no need to take it out on the poor kid. To be quite frank, I don't particularly like orange either. I wish I had blonde fur like mom, but no, I get stuck with this cami awful color that just screams hideous," Kurama said. Before Naruto hurried off to check out his new hair, Kushina said, "There you go, dear, why don't you go make sure it looks okay?" As Naruto's laughter reverberated throughout the house, Kushina questioned, "Now then, what's this talk about getting back together? Surely you want to rejoin to regain all your power, Kanari?" Kurama trailed off, and Kanari concluded at Kushina's inquiry. "Well, it's not exactly to cut and dry Kushina, we can't actually join together into one being again. If we want all our powers in one entity, then we would have to," Kurama said. "Mate. We would have to mate. And then, our child would have both powers so in a sense we could cease to exist, or we might lose all our powers to that kid. But then again, it used to be custom in the old days for our kind to do this every time that a new heir appeared so we would age with them. If you plan for that Gaki to be our new summoner then this wouldn't be out of the ordinary, it's just that, well," Kanari continued before Kurama took up the discussion. Kurama said, "We're both scared, this prospect of ceasing to exist isn't pleasant even for me, but I have spent 5 years with the kid, and I know he would be a great summoner. Better even than you Kushina. But, Kanari didn't spend all that time with him and she is more doubtful. Besides, you still have to teach the kid how to use magic which could take who knows how long." Then, behind Kushina, there was a sniffle, and the three turned to see Naruto, who was trying to contain his tears. Naruto cried out and gasped before crashing into Kanari and squeezing her as though he could take away all of her fears. I'm sniffle, so sorry Kon. Kanari. You're afraid because of M.Me. Please do. Don't be afraid, I'll be fine without your help, just stay like you were and don't be. Sniffle, afraid anymore, they said. With Naruto's tears streaking our lustrous orange fur, Kanari remarked, "Why would you care for me, Gaki? You don't even know me, so why?" Kurama used his tails to lift Naruto off the bed and put him back in Kushina's arm as she carried him off for some ramen with his family. Because that's Naruto, he knows the pain and fears of death and not having the power to do anything about it, so he doesn't want you to go through it as well. Kurama asked his spouse, "So, what did you think of the kid?" He just hugged me like I was his best friend. No one has done that since mom, even you don't hold me like that. If we do this, do you honestly believe that he will keep the power from going to his head, that he would respect us? Kanari asked Kurama. I can't speak for certain about that, but what I can be certain of is that boy will protect his precious people to his death and even beyond that possibly, Kurama said with a nod. Before the pair returned to their base language of growls and yips, Kanari muttered, "Okay, then, let's do this. Just get it over with you quick shot." With Naruto gazed at the bowl of ramen placed before him with curiosity, as if it would vanish if he even dared to think it was real. When Naruto asked, "Is it poisoned?" Kushina choked on her noodles, and Minato once again had a dejected expression. Minato muttered, "My cooking isn't that bad, is it?" as the aura of depression resurfaced around him. When Naruto returned, he was busy eating the bowl of ramen as a peace offering. "No, I mean, I don't know, I haven't eaten it yet, 2.san. It's just that, people usually never just give me food, and when they do, it was always poisoned. After his bowl was empty, Naruto went on, but this is very delicious, the best food ever, 2.san, of course. My palate isn't exactly the finest quality. As Minato bounced back from the depression and resumed eating as if nothing had happened, Kushina said, Naruto, honey, do you know what palate means? Naruto muttered as he looked at his burned legs, no, but I heard a man say it once about me. He said, your palate isn't fine enough to appreciate this wine, so I'll let you appreciate how the flames smell as they burn. He lit me on fire. Kushina said, drawing curious glances from both men, okay, it's decided. For once, Minato became excited at the thought of training his son after Kushina stated, we are going to teach you Naruto, and then once you have reached a respectable level of knowledge, we will train you. As Naruto ran off to find something, he returned with a bundle in his hands and dropped it on the floor with a dull thump. Yay, I promise now, I'll give it my all so that when we're done, you can be proud of me and I'll protect all my people so they will never be alone again. Naruto sat back down and started reading, A Child's Introduction to the Alphabet, with his mother, saying, but first, I have to learn how to read. 1 year later, as his mother asked him questions, Naruto yawned and drifted through his memories, his mind operating on autopilot. Since his arrival in Earthland, Fury, or whatever you wanted to call it, a lot had changed. First and foremost, he discovered that orange wasn't the worst thing in the world. Rather, he thought it was a lovely color in the correct shade. The small ball of fur on his head is another thing. 8 months after his arrival, his mother had a major fuss over a baby's birth, and Minato looked after Naruto for the day because Kushina seemed to think he was useless with a baby. Nevertheless, Naruto escaped his father and crept into the room of Kanari and Kurama, where he sat in a corner and watched in silence as his supernatural aura spirit, Familiar, was born. Since then, Kushina had been concerned about Naruto because he was becoming more and more interested in the other sex. Before she yelled at him to ask his father, he could still picture her face when he asked what a clitoris was. It was nearly as red as her hair. His mother rarely yelled at him, so that alone raised red flags in his mind. Nevertheless, he did just that, which only caused his father to laugh aloud before he asked what his mother was teaching him and held up a book on female anatomy. Not only was that book missing from their personal library, but he also found several others missing after inspecting the bedroom. The odd thing was that the library was behind a locked door. That was Naruto, who was secretly a thief and ninja. Following that, when Naruto was away on business trips, Minato started teaching him other skills like picking locks, haggling in stores, and how to make dinner. However, he had informed Naruto that he would be around much more after the year-long learning process with Kushina, possibly involving a resignation from a council. Naruto also observed that although his mother appeared to be the dominant one in their relationship, Minato was stronger than her, and that she appeared to be addicted to both baked goods and ramen. His best friend Kuro, the son of Kurama and Kanari, was slapping him as his tail swayed joyfully back and forth while he dreamed about something, but a tap on his shoulder snapped him out of his reverie. Unlike his mother and father, who had been gradually disappearing, he only had one tail at the moment. They had claimed that once he began learning about his family magic, Kuro and Naruto would comprehend it better. The little kid's head, shoulders, and body were all covered in blood-red fur. His ears were a sunburned orange color, and his tail was constantly alternating between honey blonde and sun-kissed blonde. One fang was always hanging over his lip, and his eyes were a mix of blue and red. On multiple occasions, Kushina had taken him by surprise and squealed, "Kawaii," as he squeezed the kit. As Naruto's focus returned to her, Kushina reprimanded him, "Dear, I asked you a question. Could you please pay attention instead of daydreaming?" Before Kushina sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose, Naruto muttered, "Sorry, Mom, I was just thinking about this past year. Ever since I've arrived, nothing but good thing has happened for me, and I can't help but feel like something evil is on the horizon." Kushina repeated the question, saying, "All the more reason to pay attention, so that we can get to training you with magic. Then you can fight off the evil with us, okay?" When Kushina noticed Naruto turning to gaze out the window for a few minutes, she said, "Okay, now then, what is magic?" He started just as she was about to grow irritated with him. With his eyes closed and his head tilted, hopeful ally, Naruto replied, "Magic. Magic is the reaction between the Ethernano, or aura in something, and the Ethernano in the earth or air. Or something like that, right, Mom?" Kushina and Naruto both got up from their chairs and ran to his room. Kuro nestled against him to share his warmth. "Yes, that is correct, and that is the end of the lesson. Now then, go get ready. We're going into town to buy you a present for finishing your lesson, okay?" Kushina said. He hurried into his room and calmly placed Kuro on the bed to prevent him from waking. The youngster had not changed much in the previous year. His hair color issues had finally been resolved with a red and yellow blend that appeared to blend into a peachy hue on his front spike, which drooped down between his eyes. Naruto hurried back down the stairs, slipping down the banister and flipping in mid-air as he landed in front of his mother, who giggled, making him take responsibility. Naruto had changed out of his casual home clothes, which consisted of a white shirt and black shorts, and put on an orange jacket over his shirt and blue jeans instead. As Naruto humphed, and the two locked the door before making their way to the neighboring town along the path beside their home, Kushina remarked, "Gomen, it's just that when you first arrived, you hated orange and now you wear it like Kurama, Kanari, and Kuro wear their fur. It's like you're trying to spread the wonder of orange to everyone." Naruto made the decision to try to force his mother to teach him about magic because the walk would take about an hour. The redhead paused for a half step before continuing on her merry way alongside her son when Naruto asked, "Mom, could you please teach me about the magic that you and Dad use?" Kushina left the end open for Naruto to fill in, saying, "I suppose I could, son. Let's start with what you do know, which is..." Naruto looked expectantly at Kushina and said, "I don't really know much, that's why I asked for you to tell me about it. What I do know is that you use a form of magic known as aura magic, leading people like us to be called auramancers." Kushina began, but Naruto interrupted, saying, "Okay, so first things first then, there are two versions of aura magic and each is unique to the user's aura. That is to say I use conjuration, while your father uses manipulation." Naruto muttered melancholy, "Oh, so I can only use one kind of aura magic. I don't even get to choose which kinda sucks." Kushina laughed at her little, not so little, boy. "Well, technically, that's 1/3 correct. I said each aura is unique so you might have the ability to use both. It's just that that's a really low chance. The other third is that there is an ancient form of aura magic known as revelation which allows the users to in a sense, create magic at will. For instance, there is Slayer magic which is divided into dragons and gods, but there is no demon slayer magic, so if you had the revelation path of aura magic then you could make it and teach it to others that you wished to learn demon slayer magic." Kushina clarified as the young man bounced around with delight. Naruto asked eagerly, and understandably, "So, what are the chances of me getting that path of aura magic?" This was, in a way, his family's history. As Naruto nodded and remained silent while listening to his mother carefully, Kushina said, "Well, like I said, it is an ancient form of aura magic. In fact, it is said that only the aura resonator could unlock it. But in order for you to understand that, you would need to know a bit more about aura magic, so I'll fill in the blanks. Kurama, Kanari, and Kuro are what are known as aura familiars, assistants in a sense to auramancers. Each one grants special skills to their partners, but that is for later. For now I'll stick to the basics. In this world there are rumored to be 9 aura familiars. Which in a sense is confirmed from the fact that our familiars are the 9-tailed foxes. Anyways, in order to use the special skills of each familiar, the partner needs to be able to resonate their aura with their familiars, unlocking a form known as chaos form. There are 3 forms total, but I'll cover those later. An aura resonator is a person that has collected all 9 keys and has unlocked chaos mode with each familiar. An aura breaker is someone who has done the same up to the 2nd form and someone who masters the 3rd form. Well, no one has ever done it. Kushina explained before stopping and turning to her unique child who had frozen with anime eyes before he uttered 2 words that would later change the world. "Aura King," was Naruto's declaration as Kushina's perspiration fell at the thought of her son's consequences. With a determined expression on Naruto's face, Kushina remarked, "Look, you can call it whatever you want when you achieve it." When Naruto saw a ship attacking the nearby village, he shouted, "Mock me now, but one day, I'll do it. I'll gather the 9 keys and finish the legendary tale and then, everyone, even you and Dad, will call me King. Naruto Uzumaki, King of the Pirates," and pointed. Naruto shouted, "Ka-san. We have to help that village or they'll probably end up destroying it." He then ran off in the direction of the village, his mother pursuing him. Naruto swiftly surveyed the destruction the pirates had inflicted on this village as he ran through the gates. Bloodied bodies were strewn across the streets, buildings were on fire, and women were clad in torn garments that exposed their private parts. The cages were the worst part, though. Hundreds of them were being carried onto the pirate ship, and inside were young children roughly Naruto's age. Naruto ran the closest pirate, who was facing away from him, after evaluating the situation. With well-trained muscles, Naruto leapt into the air and landed on his shoulders, knocking the pirate off balance at the unexpected weight gain before he fell to the ground with Naruto on top of him. But the brutish man reacted swiftly, backhanded Naruto with a plate-sized palm, sending the young boy into the building and causing him to scream in agony as the pirate lifted him over his shoulder and threw him in a spare cell. He then hauled that on board as well and threw it in a back corner, close to one of the portholes. The pirate laughed at the children's situation and said sternly, "Haha, little brat, you seem to have a bit of spirit. Well, that'll change once we reach the tower." He then left. Alright, that didn't work out the way I had hoped. I'm stuck with the other kids now, and Chan won't be able to find me. Oh no, I don't know how to fight, so why did I just go in like San or Chan? As the pirate ship sailed out to sea, Naruto heard a cracking sound and looked up to see the sails filling with wind. Naruto sat silently, refusing to give up, until he heard a flapping sound. He then turned to face the hole and saw his mother flying next to them, 2 wings growing out of her back as she struggled to control the odd appendages. Naruto yelled into the wind, "Chan, I'm down here in the hold," in the hopes that his mother would hear him. They succeeded as she turned and landed next to the hole, then disposed of the problematic wings, crawled through the hole, and gave her son the sewn nest. As Kushina clenched a sword in her hand and slashed cleanly through the lock, the cage door swung open and Naruto fell out. Chan, I was worried that you wouldn't be able to find me or catch up to us. Was that your conjuration path?" Naruto hurriedly said. Kushina remained silent as Naruto got to his feet, but then she lifted her hand and gave him a slap, leaving a big red mark on his cheek. Naruto then looked up at his mother, who was now crying uncontrollably. As the sobs came, Naruto hugged her and touched her stomach, whispering, Chan. Kushina's shout caught the attention of other kids, who started crying for their parents. "You fool! Did you even think for a second before you rushed into that village? I know you think you can conquer the world because of your upbringing, but Naruto, there are powerful people out there in the world, and you can't fight everyone on your own. You can't protect everyone, and if you ever make me think that I've lost you again, I'll never forgive you." Kushina took her son's hand and headed for the window again, only to be dragged back by him. "Now then, let's get out of here." As Kushina rubbed her head and sighed, gazing out the window at the sky as though in contemplation, Naruto remarked, "No, Chan. We can't just leave these kids with the pirates. One of them told me that they're being taken to the tower, whatever that is, but it doesn't sound good." In order to take control of the ship and turn it back into port, Kushina said, "Fine, let's get this done. Remember, I still have to buy you a present for all your good work." The mother and son team made their way to the deck. Their thought-out plan took a sharp turn when they realized they were outnumbered. Kushina was not given enough time to switch into chaos mode and massacre the pirates, which resulted in the 2 of them being chained to the side of the deck while the pirates surrounded them and made fun of them. Naruto was crying over their current predicament and blaming himself for attempting to be heroic once more. When Naruto looked up and saw the captain, or what he thought was the captain because everyone called him that, a voice mockingly said, "Are the cuffs too tight for the little cry, baby?" Naruto became enraged when the captain leaned down and ran his hand over Kushina's face before kissing her cheek. "And who is this pretty thing?" he asked. Naruto screamed, "Stop it, you sick freak. Leave my Chan alone." Just before placed fist struck his stomach. "Well, maybe giving birth won't have loosened you up too much, or else it won't be fun at all," Kushina said, her eyes widening in imitation of Naruto's as his anger increased. "Oh, so you're the little brat mother, huh?" Naruto gritted his teeth and trembled visibly in anger as the captain said, "Just you wait, give it a little time and you'll be addicted to me, practically begging for me to give you another child. You have no right to speak to my Chan in such a rude manner. You should consider yourself fortunate that she is even in your presence, dog, as if she would pursue someone like you, with your stringy hair and beer gut." Before the pirates started giggling at the child for not keeping quiet, Naruto yelled, "Well, this is fascinating. Crazy. Give this brat a hard time." As he continued to tell Kushina what he was going to do to her, the captain yelled, which infuriated Naruto, who leapt from his seat, wrapped his chains around Scully's thick neck, and leapt overboard, landing all of his weight on Scully's neck as he fell backwards. A loud pop then caused many of the pirates to widen their eyes, realizing that their first mate had just been killed by a spoiled child with anger management problems. The only thought that crossed Naruto's mind as he fell toward the ocean was, "If there is a god in heaven, then please give me a way back up there to save my Chan." He closed his eyes and concentrated, until his chains caught on one of the cannons and he swung back up, catching the edge of the deck as he climbed over. He should never have had to witness the captain kissing his mother while groping her with one hand and drifting too low for Naruto's comfort as he exploded if he had looked in that direction. He ripped the chains apart with a loud screech, and a magic circle materialized in front of him. A blade formed in his hand, and he sped forward faster than ever before, slipping past the pirates. his clothes lining the captain as he was torn from his prize and carried farther down the deck by Naruto as he faced off against the captain of this slave trading ship. Kushina was in front of the group as his mates went to help the captain, but they were stopped by a pair of blades. She had been slowly forming key after key and trying to unlock her cuffs without the rest of the group knowing. And now she was free and going to help her son take over this vessel. Previously, she couldn't fight because she was afraid Naruto would get hurt and didn't have enough time to form any weapons, but now they had given her time to form not just one, but two weapons. With Naruto, with his newfound speed, Naruto was practically dancing around the slower and older captain, leaving shallow cuts all over him. These cuts weren't crippling, but they hurt a lot when they were covered in sweat and rubbed against skin, which is typically what happens during a sword fight or other fight. Hey, brat, you had better not assume that this battle is over just because you can use magic. Other mages have attacked us in the past, and they all perished at my blade, just like you will. I'll step up this battle now that you appear capable of keeping up with me. As a magic circle materialized at the tip of his blade and then burst into flame, the captain declared. Magic of fire. Since I've only recently acquired these abilities, I'd better exercise caution, but I can't let him go. Naruto muttered to himself, I'll just have to hold him off until Chan can finish the lackeys and help me. Then, as he fell to the ground to avoid the captain's high slash, his sixth sense, which had evolved to help protect him from the mobs back in Konoha, came into play. As the blade sank into the deck next to him, Naruto continued the motion, rolling sideways. It should come as no surprise that the flames, which were controlled by the captain, did not leap to the wood. As Naruto attempted to dodge a third attack that came from perpendicular to the deck, the flaming blade caught his shoulder, digging in and cutting deeply before the captain removed it, the heat instantly cauterizing the wound. With rough laughter, the captain yelled, "Haha, do you see the difference between our levels now, brat? You couldn't hope to beat me." Naruto then gripped the blade tightly and stabbed it through the captain's leg. Naruto tried to fight back by gritting his teeth and pushing through the pain, but his vision went hazy when the captain grabbed him by the throat, cutting off the necessary air supply, and threw him into the side of one of the deck's heave-set cannons. The captain then howled in agony before kicking Naruto in the chest, sending the younger male into the edge of the deck. The captain then repeated the motion while holding Naruto over the edge. Good one, kid. I thought you were done, but you still had some strength left. But now that our battle is over, feed the sharks and be a good little chum. As he dropped Naruto, the captain yelled, but Naruto wasn't finished yet. He turned his body in midair and sank his blade into the ship's side. Then, using a skill he didn't realize he had, he kicked upwards, sending the cannon backwards and colliding with the captain's stomach, causing him to howl in agony once more and spout a series of curses. However, Naruto also thrust his hand upwards and grabbed the captain's outstretched hand, smashing the fingers against the hardened wood of the ship as he dropped his flaming sword. The captain's smile turned to a snarl as he turned and thrust his blade at Naruto, intending to kill the child. Naruto's shoulder erupted in flaming pain as he gritted his teeth and tasted blood in his mouth. He then swallowed and closed his eyes. Come on, Naruto. You have overcome all obstacles to get here, and you have overcome all odds to find your family. Are you going to give up now and allow a large, foul-smelling pirate who trades slaves to defeat you? No, Chan, San, Kurama, Kanari, Kuro, they're all depending on you. Before his eyes widened and changed from their typical electric blue to a crimson red, Naruto pondered. When he pulled his hand away from the captain, a string of fire followed, setting Naruto's finger on fire like a match. Before Naruto could question the action, he pushed his finger to the end of the cannon's fuse before it exploded, hurling the big man back into the mast and into the captain's gut. The man only said, Samahada, before he passed out. Captain Kisame. As Kushina killed the pirates and saw Naruto scaling the deck, one of the mates yelled, Kuso. Then, two blades appeared on either side of his neck, severing both his head and his life. Kushina then gave the thumbs up and passed out from the agony. Once more, with his arms folded across his chest, Minato yelled as he saw his son approaching. Breathing heavily, Naruto threw one knee upwards at his father's face, which was also blocked, before Minato kicked him away. Naruto was running at his father again, his shirt already gone to the sidelines, his hair dripping with sweat, and his face covered in the salty liquid that followed the mini river. Once more, this challenge had been going on for 2 hours, and Kushina could see that Naruto was tired, heck. She thought he would have given up 30 minutes ago, but he was stubborn and refused to lose a challenge. Minato gave the order as Naruto kept trying to attack his father while his mother sat on the sidelines under a large tree that provided shade. She wasn't a frail girl, but really, who turned down some shade? seeing her son fail once more to successfully make Minato take a step back. Naruto, do I need to explain it to you again? If you want to be successful, you must use your manipulation aura. The goal of this path is to control the aura within our bodies, which can be used to enhance our bodies or, in some cases, to replicate the magic of others. Now, put that ability to use and make me move. When Minato saw that his son was finally getting tired, he lowered his defenses and leaned back, nearly taking Minato down with a flying tackle. Well, you're learning, but if you lack the necessary abilities to apply the information, observations are meaningless. While Naruto took a few minutes to rest, the older blonde reprimanded him in a lecture-like manner. There are several levels for each path: apprentice, adept, master, and sage. Another magic can be called upon at each level. As a master, I can use 3 different magics in addition to my aura magic. In addition, I always carry at least 5 other aura lacrimas with me. The aura release command, which releases a magic I've copied and seals it into a lacrima, stores the magic in storage in each aura lacrima. If I want to get them out to use them, Minato paused, waiting for Naruto to complete the lesson. Father, you use the aura break command, correct? Still gasping for air, Naruto uttered those words. Yes, but you can't learn how to make the lacrimas yet because it's an adept skill. Additionally, you can't learn that my aura sphere is an adept attack either, Minato said casually as he leaned aside and punched Naruto back to his spot. Minato concluded by punching Naruto, rattling the younger blonde's arm, and saying, "That is why an auramancer's greatest enemy is another auramancer, since we can't copy aura magic since we already have it." Why does it feel like I'm punching a wall because your body is so hard? While tending to his injured hand, Naruto yelled. As Naruto nodded and threw himself back at his father, Minato responded, "It's like that because I'm bracing it with my aura, making it harder, as well as powering my muscles, giving them a boost. That is why you'll need to use your aura to beat me." As he threw a straight kick, an idea suddenly came to Naruto's mind. Minato caught the kick and held the boy in place. "Come on, tell me what you've learned so far. Did you truly believe that a head-on attack would defeat a more formidable opponent?" Minato inquired as Naruto grinned, something Minato initially failed to notice but picked up on in Naruto's voice as he spoke. As Naruto's leg twisted, he bowed around Minato's guard, kicked him in the face, and threw him back. "Really, father, it stands to reason that if you can make your body hard like stone, then you can also make it flexible like water." "Interesting, huh? I'm proud of you because, as far as I know, anyone who attempts that challenge either fails or overwhelms their opponent by being faster or harder." Minato turned and gestured for Kushina to take her place in the shade, saying, "That inventiness will help you with your mother's path." Kushina pulled out her sword and gestured for Naruto to follow suit. "Well, you beat your father, but he is a big softie when it comes to his family. I, on the other hand, prefer it when you surpass my expectations for you." As Naruto drew his sword, testing his abilities as it changed according to his whim, Kushina said, "Now then, to add to what your father said, while each level in his path allows for an additional magic, in my path it allows you to create an additional object in addition to your sword, so you could potentially dual-wield swords, use a sword dot and shield combo, 1 magic and 1 sword, or any other number of things. Considering you create what you envision, the possibilities are endless." "All right, Naruto, you understand the challenge is that first blood wins?" Using her son's name to demonstrate that she wouldn't hold back simply because he was her son, Kushina asked. "You got it, Ka-chan." The 2 sword wielders flew at each other, with only a single white slash remaining in the middle as they paused at opposite ends of the track. A few seconds later, a cut appeared on Naruto's cheek, releasing a drop of blood. Naruto responded, holding his blade out to his side so it wouldn't get in the way. "Looks like I win, so now, again." Kushina gave the order as she charged at Naruto, winning another quick draw battle with him as they continued to make the same motion. He pushed himself up again and charged at his mother, who stood and waited this time, her form suddenly enveloping as Naruto flew past her with his sword outstretched. Naruto would lose repeatedly, which he attributed to his mother's superior skill, which it was. When Naruto turned around, he saw his mother wearing a metal plate directly over the area where he had cut her. "Looks like I finally got you." "What, that's cheating," Naruto said confidently. "You can't just make more stuff mid-fight." His mother laughed as Naruto screamed. "Really, I was under the impression that it was no holds barred, or was you swinging at your innocent and defenseless mother a mistake?" As Naruto pouted, Kushina spoke from behind her hand, hiding her broad smile. "All right, let's go again, I'll definitely get you this time," Naruto said with confidence, but he failed to win her that time or the next 15 times he tried. In fact, by the time he was prepared to give up, His body was covered in small cuts that hurt a lot even though they weren't bleeding. "This is the last time, and I'm going to get you for sure now, Chan, now that I know all your tricks," Naruto exclaimed as he did a thumbs up, making Minato howl with laughter. "Alright, you don't trust me, but I'll do it, beat you, and then I'll come over there and beat you so badly that you'll look like you forgot your anniversary once more." Minato froze and turned slowly to see his wife grinning sickly sweetly as Naruto yelled, "Once more, dear, when did you forget our anniversary?" With clenched teeth, Kushina questioned as the shadowy tree abruptly lost its top after Kushina's sword swung through the spot where Minato's head had been just moments before. "Please leave the fool alone, Chan, so we can complete my test," Naruto yelled, and Kushina turned to him, her expression disappointed. "But Naruto," Kushina said, "I don't wanna," her lower lip trembling as she extended her sword in preparation to charge at Naruto, who imitated her move. Both Oromancers suddenly charged at one another, and Naruto focused on his blade as it vanished, which accelerated him as he swung his hand. The blade suddenly sprouted, and the high speed collided with Kushina's blade, knocking her off balance as he applied his blade across her stomach, creating a tiny cut that dripped blood. "Yada! I did it at last," Naruto yelled while leaping about. After 3 weeks with a nervous flick of his sword in and out of its scabbard, Naruto began, "Are you sure we have to do this? I mean, do I have to do it? Aren't you or 2.san more equipped for this, and in any case, Kushina and I are already trained to perform this, we're just curious if you are." Minato stepped in and shoved Naruto into the camp after putting a hand on his shoulder. After stumbling forward and attempting to get his feet under him, Naruto was slain by a swing of a dangerously sharp sword. He looked up to see a swarm of bandits encircling him, with irate expressions on everyone's faces, and he sent glares, risking a quick glance back at the bushes where his parents were watching. After all, it was their plan to raid a bandit camp to test young Naruto's abilities with his blade, conjuring, and manipulating, which he employed as he bowed his body in half to avoid the next blow. As the bandits paused, staring at him as if he were insane, Naruto said, "Now, I don't want any trouble, we can end this peacefully, just put your weapons down, and I'll walk away, you'll walk away, and everyone will live. We want trouble and to end this with you in pieces, so that's too bad. Sit still so we can kill you, you little wretch." Before he realized he was missing a finger, one of the bandits yelled and arrogantly pointed at Naruto. With his eyes closed and his blade spinning like a baton, Naruto shot back, "Oh well, don't say I didn't warn you." The boy uttered the words, "Fire windmill," as his blade erupted in flames. A number of bandits took a chance by thrusting their weak swords, but the fire allowed Naruto's sword to sever them like a knife through butter, leaving the ends glowing red hot. Naruto uttered the words, "Kitsune tail swipe," before launching his next attack, which involved swinging his blade mid-level and sending out a fire wave that struck a number of bandits who were too close to avoid it before continuing to strike their living quarters. The man's muscles protruded from his arms like cans, forcing Naruto to roll to the side and swing his sword up to catch the downward slash. Using his magic, Naruto's blade sprouted another blade, avoiding the man's sword and stabbing him in the shoulder. His force abruptly vanished as Naruto fell beneath him, head-butting his nads on the follow-through, taking the man down as he swung his arm out and caught a wrist mid-punch. Bracing his legs, he swung the person towards the crowd, knocking several more down. Naruto laughed at the dog pile of bodies as he leapt to the side once more, his sword flashing through the air, disarming the attacker, who fell backwards with fear on his face. As he spun, feeling a blade bite into his back, Naruto cursed himself for losing concentration. His sword caught the offending swordswoman in the side, leaving her ripped clothing smeared with blood. He then lashed out with a punch, piercing her gut with his fist, knocking her out cold and throwing her back. After spinning on his heel and planting his sword in the ground, Naruto used it to raise himself and plant both of his feet in a man's chest. He then ran around the group, kicking more people away before leaping up and pulling his sword up with the point down. The bandits were flung against rock walls and one another, their clothing scorched from the powered down attack, as Naruto uttered the words, "Falling star," as his sword sank into the ground with ease and a ring of fire emerged from the impact. Naruto flipped his sword over and put it back in its sheath when he realized all the bandits were down. As he turned to go, Minato gave him a high five and Kushina gave him an embrace. "And just consider that I defeated them without taking a human life," Naruto yelled joyfully, as if that were the high point of his day, and as a result, he failed to notice the flying arrow until it had passed through his shoulder, causing a searing pain to radiate from the wound. As a result, Minato and Kushina both used their abilities to completely destroy the assailant, one of the bandits Naruto had vanquished. Minato threw a tiny airwave that cut deep into the attacker's chest, and Kushina created a whip, wrapped the end around his neck, and then pulled violently, severing the head. But as the mutilated bandit fell, two more stood up, not really pushing themselves up with their arms, but brandishing swords, and rushed the couple, who merely did the same thing, but this time they both rolled to the side, avoiding the slashing blows. The two bandits swung with perfect coordination, mirroring each other as they jumped over a follow-up of a low sweeping attack. Kushina blocked with her trusted blade and kicked her enemy back, causing him to fall into the other as they fell to the ground in a crumpled heap. But as soon as they fell, two more appeared, joining the two that had already been killed. The four bandits then attacked the couple, with more joining every second. They all struck precisely at the right times, one blocking while another attacked and one launching another over the battle to encircle them. It was as though they were watching the fight from above, allowing them to see where to attack, block, and launch. Kushina tore through the bandits like wet paper, her blade severing limbs and causing blood to flow like water. Minato charged the bandits with a grim expression on his face, his magic making him run faster and hit harder as the bandits fell before him like puppets with their strings cut. Both fighters saw the birth of a giant rock creature with 3 spikes on its head, an almond-shaped eye in its forehead, a mouth full of shrubbery, a torso that could double as a house, arms and legs the size of oak trees, 3 arms on each side, and 4 legs overall as the ground rumbled and all the remaining bandits fell around them as they came together back to back. Kushina and Minato simply dodged to the side of the first pair, while Kushina used her whip to sweep through the second pair, slicing them in two, and Minato used his aura sphere to decimate the third and final pair, raining tiny pebbles on them. As it finished being born, its single eye swiveled to locate its targets, throwing massive boulders in its hand like they weighed no more than a rubber ball. Kushina swung her whip around once more, intending to cut off one of the monster's legs, but it took the blow well, growing a new leg as it charged, leaping up to body slam them as they turned tail and ran. Just barely escaping certain death, they interlocked fingers, turning to look at Naruto to make sure he was safe, nodding, both of their dispositions shifting as Minato entered what he called serious mode. Kushina was beside him, taking a red key from around her neck and holding it in front of her, opening an invisible door as Kanari and Kurama appeared. Both of them sprang into action as soon as they saw Kushina's face, disappearing into golden sparkles that engulfed her as she transitioned into chaos mode, her once caring and playful expression now speaking of death to whoever had harmed her family. He remembered what his mother had taught him about one of their special style's more complex magics as he watched her use it. Rewind as Naruto sat cross-legged and focused solely on the redhead in front of him, Kushina declared, "Now then, Naruto, today, I'm going to teach you about Chaos Mode, the first level of unity between Auramancers and Familiar." Before going back to her talk on Familiars and Chaos Mode, Kushina added, "First, in order to understand this however, you have to have a reasonable-sized knowledge of Familiars, a branch of spirits. A Familiar is summoned just like a spirit is, via ki. However, one difference between the two is that Familiars are able to choose if they will be summoned. For instance, if you were a bad person, a Familiar will come the first time, but after that, may not come when called, so just owning the ki isn't good enough." Kushina began to demonstrate with Naruto's ki. Another distinction is how a Familiar's ki looks. If it's a zodiac, a spirit's ki will be silver or gold. However, there are 9 familiar keys in the world, and each one has a different combination of colors. The number 2 key is midnight blue, the number 7 is an alga green, and ours, and now yours, is orange and red. Kushina turned the key around so Naruto could see the entire thing and said, "So, the unique color combos make them stand out. Additionally, your father's branch could store an additional aura for you for every tail your familiar grows. It should be noted that, in contrast to you, who are restricted to a specific number of auras, your familiar can utilize all of them." Kushina continued. Finally, a familiar can remain outside the spirit world as long as they continue to communicate with their partners. Depending on whether they are fully recovered or injured, a familiar can be away from you for up to a week. As a result, they can assist you by using their own types of magic, each of which lets you improve your own attacks to varying degrees. For example, the number 1 key gives its bearer access to wind magic, the number 2 adds fire, the number 3 water, and the number 4 earth. Kushina nodded in agreement as she lectured, seemingly approving of everything she said. "So, what is the function of the number 9 key?" Naruto asked. How else would she know that he was paying attention? Kushina was proud that he had asked the question. "Good question. Your magic levels are greatly reinforced by the hash key. Additionally, your powers increase exponentially when you're in chaos mode." Minato continued from his perch atop a tree branch. Minato let Kushina catch her breath before continuing, Now then, on to the next subject, Chaos Mode. The manifestation of your union with your familiar is Chaos Mode. The way to enter Chaos Mode varies depending on your aura magic branch. We must exchange fluids for my branch. Typically, this entails blood, but spittle or other substances will also work. As he continued his lecture to the attentive Naruto, Minato grabbed the key from Kushina's hand and said, "She must will it to happen for Kun's branch, and it is even more difficult if her familiar is not nearby. Lastly, I can use all of my stored auras while in Chaos Mode, which also makes me stronger, faster, and smarter. Additionally, gaining physical characteristics that are similar to your familiar, such as fox ears and tails and elongated fangs, is a universal indicator that Chaos Mode is active." Minato turned away from Naruto and said, "Now, for your mother's Chaos Mode, she also becomes faster, stronger, and her creation time is basically eliminated." With a groan from Minato and a quick clap of hands from Naruto, who was keen to learn how to use Chaos Mode in order to get one step closer to outperforming his parents, Kushina continued, "Now then, on to the physical portion of today's lesson." Final flashback as a hunkered man emerged over the cliff's edge, his hands raised as though manipulating a puppet. A nasally voice uttered, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, no need to start reshaping the landscape now." As a nearby cloud transformed into a ghoulish creature that picked him up and flew away faster than anyone cared to pursue him, the man said, his bloody red hair swishing in the wind, "I received a request to take care of this encampment of bandits, but it appears as if you already did my job for me, so if you'll excuse me, I'll be on my way." A drop of sweat trickled down Naruto's face, dripping off his chin and splintering on the parched ground as he said, "Well, I suppose that did the job, Hatu-san." Minato turned back to Naruto and picked him up, revealing some white teeth as he carried him home, promising to talk to Kushina about the trip. "I want to say yeah, but I think that man was hiding something. Like for instance, why an S-class mage was coming way out in the country to take out a small encampment of bandits. Even more impressive is that he uses dull magic, a skill one normally doesn't associate with an S-class mage." Naruto yelled, "NNNNOOO," as he flew at the enemy, his magic exploding. Most of the time, he wouldn't be this emotional and rush in without even a vague plan. Normally, of course, his parents hadn't just been killed by a huge black dragon. His heart was breaking every second he watched them as their bodies plummeted from such heights, most likely because the likelihood that they had died increased with each passing second. In his angry, deranged state, poor 15-year-old Naruto pushed the next level of his sync magic, the term for Chaos Mode and other attacks involving the fusion of familiar and user, into his mind. Yes, a lot of good that did now. His mother had warned him of this level and advised him to never try to achieve until she gave him permission. Kuro gave Naruto his power in Chaos Mode, essentially fusing the two in a human body and placing Naruto in charge. The following level, Havoc form, was the opposite, with them still merging but inside Kuro's body, forming a beastly powerhouse controlled by instincts. And the natural reaction at the moment was anger toward the enormous black dragon, which would stop him with ease and probably kill him. Havoc Naruto drew back his right arm and delivered a punch that broke the sound barrier with a dull boom, striking the dragon, which showed no signs of feeling the attack. Havoc Naruto scowled before unleashing a lightning fast volley of blur, like punches and kicks, totaling more than 150 in a minute. The dragon then whirled on him, its hand swatting him away like a bug, but this still only caused a low growl from its throat. Havoc Naruto stumbled to the ground and collided with it, causing a deep hole from which he leapt, landing on the ground and pursuing his target. When he reached a small bump, he pushed himself off and flew after the dragon, which just slapped him away with its tail once more, leaving Havoc Naruto's torso with a long gash that spit blood like a geyser. As he reared back, Havoc Naruto snatched the dragon's tail and slammed it into the dragon's snout, causing the hammer to crack and then split apart as it struck the animal. With a low growl, Havoc Naruto used his limited mental faculties to reconsider his strategy as fire poured out of his hands and covered the black dragon, who was still not showing any signs of pain. Before the dragon felt a searing sensation at its ear as Havoc Naruto drove a white blade straight into the sensitive flesh, it let the fire go out. Even though it didn't show it, the dragon was surprised that the little pest had vanished. Then, as the dragon opened its great maw, a magic circle appeared before a laser that could have destroyed Konoha in a second. The laser tore across the landscape, leaving a huge trench behind as the nearby ocean flooded into it, separating the present island from the mainland. The dragon dove down, barrel rolling as Havoc Naruto fell off as it turned on him, opening its mouth to swallow him whole, the roar finally piercing the fog in his head as he howled with joy and attacked again. Havoc Naruto felt a tiny shiver of fear, but it was quickly overtaken by the torrent of rage and hatred that fed his newfound strength. Nevertheless, Naruto managed to break through for a brief moment to formulate an attack before being pushed to the back of his own mind. With his arms spread wide, 2 enormous black magic circles appeared, followed by a third, 3 times larger than the first 2. At last, a second one, identical in size to the 2 at his arms, emerged beneath his feet. As he opened his mouth to complete the attack, a small circle of black magic appeared as a palpable black energy rushed out. The small beam appeared to compound exponentially as it grew to rival the dragon's beam, and the creature, unable to block the attack, attempted to dodge it instead. The ray grazed the dragon's tail, completely erasing it as it flew away as quickly as it could, vowing to exact revenge on the little runt who had done this. It only heard the name of the attack that had damaged it as it flew away, so the young boy appeared to be doing the impossible by harming the powerful creature, but he wasn't. Although the dragon hadn't yet found him a worthy foe, it sensed that he had the potential to get stronger and eventually challenge the once glorious Zeref, who would soon make a comeback. The day would see a wonderful thing. A mage king uprooted from his throne, and it would long to see its master again. Yes, this boy would be a good fit for the part, especially if he had the motivation of getting even with his parents. As Havoc form departed, he breathed heavily, using all of its energy in a single blow. The name of Havoc form's final assault was Ebony Abyss. His body was tumbling end over end toward the ground as he attempted to breathe more oxygen even as he fell. He saw the dragon's retreating form as he fell, and even though its tail grew back behind it, he was not surprised because the monster didn't think he was worth killing despite his wound because it knew it could simply grow the extremity again. He was determined to accept the gift, even though his survival today was solely due to luck and a higher power's wish. He closed his eyes and plunged into the sea, where he was replaced by a 15-foot tall pillar of water. He surfaced again, pushing himself to the island where his parents slept with the last of his strength. As he crouched low over their bodies, tears trickled down his cheeks and struck Minato. No, it was his father's bare chest with a long gash cut into it. Naruto could see the contents of his body through the opening, and he could tell that his heart was no longer beating. When he heard a low cough, he spun around on his mother's prone body while blood spurted from her mouth in yet another racking cough, scattering the valuable red liquid onto the small island's sands. He scurried to her side and tried to help her up by putting one arm under her head. The coughing stopped in this new position. Her appearance was worse than his father's. She was missing an arm from the elbow down, had a long cut that went through her left eye, and her clothes were torn, revealing her enormous breasts. Despite this, Naruto didn't blush because he understood how serious the situation was. With only an inch of skin left unflayed and her right foot bent out at an odd angle, her lower body appeared to have been struck by a meat grinder. However, Naruto believes that everything will be alright as long as she is alive. Naruto squeaked out, his voice a pathetic remnant of its once proud tune. "Mom, you're okay. Just hold on, I'll blast it all, I can't do anything. Please Mom, hold on, I know it hurts but I'm trying to come up with a plan." When a cold, damp hand touched Naruto's cheek, he closed his eyes and prayed for anything, to help him save his mother. A single tear formed in his mother's remaining eye, and he opened his eyes to meet her gaze. "It's okay, dear, I mean Naruto, everything will be better in just a minute, just let go. But first, promise me that you won't let your anger get the best of you, and try to find a nice girl. After all, I don't want you to get too lonely. One last thing before I go, Minato will kill me if I'm late for my own death. I love you, so did your father even though he didn't show it quite as well, and we never regretted only having one son because you had enough love and compassion for all the children in the world." Kushina murmured, and with that, the blood fell from his cheek. Naruto's mouth opened and inhaled to speak before it was too late, but it was too late because the light left her eye and the tear was streaming down her cheeks. Her mouth even twisted into a final smile as her hand fell. Before he saw his friend's form, Kuro climbed out of the water, trembling dry, and he followed Naruto's cry, MMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMmm. He then let out a loud keening for the lives lost. For several hours, it continued in this manner, with only a brief pause for one or the other to catch their breath before erupting with another scream to the sky. After 5 hours, Naruto finally made his body work by excavating a small hole on the tiny island and dragging sand away. Taking Minato's body and placing it in the hole, he made it 7 by 5 feet. He then went back to pick up Kushina's dead body and place her beside Minato, with Naruto reaching down to clasp their hands together. He raised his eyes to the sky and cursed the thing that allowed his parents to die with every word he knew and a few he made up. In exchange, he had a thought. Did he remember that pirate from long ago who had mentioned bringing a man back to life? He also mentioned a man named Zareth and something about a tower. Recalling what he had discovered about Zareth, Naruto pondered. He was the Black Mage, a manifestation of evil and hatred, best known for his creation of demons, and his favorite dragon, Acnologia, whom he enslaved. Was also said to be of the line of Merlin, the greatest mage in history, which is likely what gave him his immense power and magic. Nevertheless, I will do it since it's my only chance to win Ka. Chan and 2. Back, as he positioned a piece of driftwood as their gravestone and wrote the date, July 7th, X 777, on it. Naruto thought proudly before turning and sprinting back towards the town from so long ago. After taking one final glance at the grave and bowing as though he were following a final command, Kuro turned and ran after his friend, catching up with relative ease thanks to his lighter and sleeker body as they ran side by side in the direction of the town. Kuro, whose relationship with Naruto had grown to the point where he could occasionally tell what his partner was thinking, said, "What now, Naruto? We have no clue as to where you're headed, other than a town." But instead of slowing down, Naruto accelerated, taking longer strides before jumping onto Kuro's back, indicating that he was prepared with a counterattack. Not true, a town is a very decent clue. Slave traders wouldn't want to travel very far, so this tower is most likely nearby. And if it's still around, they're probably still getting kids to use as slaves from the town, and so people have probably noticed or at least reported the kidnappings, so if we get lucky, we should find some slave traders and get them to tell us where the tower is. Got it? Naruto responded with a smirk that was created by his long locks. He had changed, mentally and physically, over the last few years. His hair now resembled his father's more, with a few big strands hanging in his face. They were not so long as to obstruct his vision, but they were long enough to hide some of his features. His beloved whiskers, a representation of his and Kuro's relationship, were still present on his cheeks. Overall, his face appeared slightly more chiseled after losing some of its baby fat. His color wheel, which he hardly used these days save for going undercover on a job with his parents, was in the small of his neck. To further hide his multicolored hair, he pulled up a large orange cloak that had a built-in hood over his shoulders. He had developed muscles in his arms, chest, abs, and legs from years of intense training, giving him a somewhat toned appearance that was more akin to that of a runner or swimmer. Kuro at least had the grace to appear guilty when he saw the long, sleeved orange shirt beneath his cloak, the sleeves torn from his fight, and the front exposing his torso with multiple scars, including 3 deep gouges across his left side. He wore block gloves from the elbows down. His dark red shorts ended just below the knee, halfway down his leg, and were held up by a yellow sash that looped through the holes as if it had no end because there was no knot visible. A pair of black combat boots, with worn toes from years of use, were finally on his feet. At last, a blood-red key hung around his neck on a thick cord. Kuro closed his eyes and concentrated on positive thoughts, such as how he and Naruto managed to survive that battle at the whim of a higher power. As he delved further into his thoughts, he went into a trance-like state where his mental representation wandered the corridors of his mind and his heart rate dropped dangerously low before leveling out as he took deep breaths. They had just entered the town when he opened his eyes, and Naruto had slowed to a low tempo to allay suspicions. From there, Naruto surmised that any potential kidnappers would target at night, when it would be easier for them to enter and leave due to the darkness. In order to kill time and strengthen themselves, the two found a playground and watched the children from a rooftop perch before calming their breathing and practicing meditation. They merged mindscapes by focusing and synchronizing their breathing rates. The two spent time analyzing their moves from previous battles, creating new attacks and better combinations, and generally enhancing their synchronicity, which made using their sync magic easier. A loud cry, young and feminine, roused them from their trances. Quickly reacting, they jumped off the side of the roof and sank into the darkness as they stalked toward the commotion. Eventually, they peered around a corner and saw a young girl, perhaps 6 years old, flung over the shoulder of a dark figure, obviously unconscious. The two nodded at one another before leaping over the small group of 15 men, each of whom had one or more children bound and or knocked out. Before they could react, Naruto clocked 2 across the back of the head, and their bodies fell with dull thuds. With a slight crack, Kuro tightened his tail around the man's neck and he fell to the ground, dead. The groups leapt back as they turned on the two, creating some distance between them while some drew weapons and others used their hands to form magic. They then charged at Kuro and Naruto together, the former jumping up and down and slamming his claws into one's shoulder, causing blood to spill out and discolor the dark cloak. However, the latter responded appropriately, forming a pair of swords in his hands as he crossed them, the blades glinting in the moonlight as they slid across numerous legs, some of which collapsed under their own weight, causing blood to flow. 5, however, remained standing, with one of them kicking Naruto, who held his foot in agony as he crossed his arms and hardened his body with his aura. The man soon discovered that he was losing even more blood as Naruto skewered him with one blade, flinging his body at his friends as they leapt back, forgetting about Kuro, who had pierced two in the back with his tail burning, instantly cauterizing the wounds but causing the men's stomachs to burn. They collapsed, and Naruto quickly cut off their heads to end their suffering. The teenager then repeated the gestures to the other kidnappers. When the final man attempted to flee while Naruto was not looking, Kuro grabbed his foot with his tail. The little fox used more strength than he could muster and threw the man back into a building, where he groaned. Kuro's neutral expression prevented the aforementioned man from understanding whether he was serious when he said, "He doesn't need his legs for what we need him for, can we just get rid of them so he won't run again?" After a moment, he continued, "Actually, he doesn't need his arms either, or his manhood, after all. What does a pedophile need a reproductive system for? It's just a weak spot." Naruto used one sword to stab the man's foot as he cowered and attempted to crawl away. Naruto stared into the man's eyes as the other man hovered perilously over his hand before it lifted, a raging ocean meeting cold electricity. With his cool demeanor concealing his raging rage, Naruto stated, "Now then, none of that will happen if you just tell where the tower is, got it?" Naruto allowed the swords to reappear in his mind as though to tempt him, but the kidnapper took advantage of this to bite his tongue and end his own life, knowing that he would perish anyhow. There was only one problem at first. Naruto grasped the offending tongue between two fingers more quickly than the human eye could follow. The only other problem was that it was one of the deceased man's fingers. As he placed the ends at an incisor, a difficult task when one's tongue protrudes, Naruto remarked, Now, we can't have that, maybe I should take my partner's advice and remove some choice meat, after all, I hear the black market pays rather well for organs, even non-functioning ones. And teeth. Well, you got 32 for a reason, surely we were meant to spare a few." With the man's eyes wide and wet with fear and tears, respectively, Naruto said, taking off the pliers to let him speak, "Now then, maybe you can recall what I want to know. Otherwise, we're going to find out what happens when I pull hard enough to snap your jaw loose." The man pointed to the harbor and said, "Sure, I'll tell you, I know where the tower is. It's about 15 miles out to sea in that direction." He exhaled in relief at having survived when he saw Naruto release his hold, only to have Naruto kick him between the legs with enough force to break a building. Needless to say, what followed was not good. In the hour that followed, Naruto saw the tower and Kuro sleeping on the boat's aft, letting Naruto know what was on his mind. Kuro sighed at his friend as Naruto responded to the unspoken question, "Yes, I had to kill them, they would harm the children, and besides, why do you care what happens to enemies? After all, you're the evil, demon fox. One does not instantly transform from Mr. Protective to Mr. Slaughterhouse, so it is irrelevant that he was concerned about Naruto's mental health. Maybe back in Konoha I was a demon fox, but here, I'm just a plain fox with plenty of skills with magic and power. But you're right, it doesn't affect me the same way as you. I still remember the cries from that night, they haunt my dreams. But that is why it's different. I've already killed, unlike you," Kuro mentioned when they arrived, and Naruto gave a last glance at his companion. Naruto muttered back, his hair hiding his eyes as he trudged up the rocky slope towards the tall steel construction. "Exactly, the sooner I do it, the better in the long run, right? I would rather it be a criminal than a civilian bystander. After all, Chan's life could be riding on this endeavor, and I refuse to fail for her sake and my own." When he entered, he saw something that infuriated him, and his fist tightened as he saw men abusing kids who had trouble doing physical tasks that were beyond their capabilities. Roaring, Naruto hurled a huge ball of fire at a man, sending him down a hallway as the explosion was caused by the flames. Chaos ensued, turning Naruto into a raging storm with fireballs flying everywhere, but they only struck or stopped the slavers, the attacking men. As Naruto attacked the slavers, the children collapsed to the ground, covering their heads in terror. His ragged clothing turned red, and twin blades sliced them to ribbons. When Kuro finally jumped into the battle, Naruto snapped the manacles and chains off the children's hands and feet and asked about the slaves' quarters. Kuro's tail was a whip of death for anyone who came close to him as men were sent flying. After getting prompt responses, Naruto rushed to rescue the remaining slaves, who were undoubtedly terrified for their lives. When he arrived, he discovered many cowering corners. His anger was boiled over, and he sent a huge beam of fire down the rows, melting the bars and locks without seriously endangering the slaves. "If we want our freedom, we have to fight for it," was yelled among the slaves as the metal cooled, and Naruto snapped the chains like twigs. Still filled with rage, Naruto turned back to the open spaces and saw mages and other creatures floating in with magic circles in front of them. The mages attacked the slaves as they started to fight back, killing a number of children in the process. Naruto hurried to stop one from attacking, but as he did, a small battalion of foot-born mages attacked him, identifying him as the one who had started the rebellion. Bones snapped under the force as he roared and smashed his feet and fists into the men. Naruto was disgusted by their death and refused to use their magic because he believed it was tainted. Reflecting on the attack, he witnessed a young boy being struck and flung back, but his chest continued to rise and fall, indicating that he was still alive. A young girl with red hair who reminds Naruto of his mother rushed to the boy's side. The mage aimed once more and fired as an older man leapt in front of the kids, protecting them with his body. Naruto shook his head and sped past the man, muttering, "Honestly, I can't allow such a kind old man to die like that, and he deserves to die peacefully, maybe in his sleep." Urza hurried to Simon's side after witnessing him get struck, her dazzling red hair trailing behind her like a flag. This is what happened when multiple mages noticed the distinctive red hair and, recalling stories of a female with a red head causing an escape, launched their attacks and opened fire on her. When Rob Oji.San appeared in front of her with his arms spread wide, she tensed up, ready to try to push Simon aside as she saw the attacks coming. Urza screamed, "Rob Oji.San, what are you doing? Move!" as her grandfather figure responded, the attacks appearing to occur in slow motion. Urza's breath caught in her throat as she attempted in vain to scream, but Rob responded, "There's still a bit of magic left in this body, and as long as I have magic, I'm going to use it to protect my precious people, like you and Simon." That was all that was heard instead. "Rob Oji.San, please no." She closed her eyes, expecting the attack to strike Rob and take the life of one of her few loved ones, but it never did. When she opened her eyes and heard a gasp, she too gasped because a young boy, perhaps 3 years Rob's senior, was standing in front of Rob, one arm extended, halting the attack as if it had never happened. Even more astounding was the fact that, rather than detonating or dissipating as would be expected from a typical attack, the energy appeared to react to his touch by gathering in front of his hand to form an ever larger ball. The attack's enormous amounts of magic caused it to start out as big as a basketball and grow to the size of a beach ball in a matter of seconds. The ball stopped spinning and then erupted in several beams that appeared to seek out the mages, their aura being bounced back by Naruto's swift spell. The mages finally ran out of energy to continue the attack and stopped it. The ball's growth stopped at house sizes as the boy smirked and muttered something loud enough for Urza to hear the distinct noises, aura barrier to collect and then aura resonance. Naruto turned to face Urza, grinned, and held out his hand before slamming the girl in the forehead and sending her falling backward. When he saw Rob, he merely nodded, and Rob bowed to express gratitude for the assistance in keeping the kids safe. As a few mages found the main troublemaker and used a series of spells that destroyed the back of his clothes, exposing his toned back and a black spiral mark that served as a symbol of his status as Kushina and Minato's son, Naruto appeared about to speak when a sharp pain struck him in the back. Kuro appeared as though beckoned as he nodded, his body transforming into red sparks that covered Naruto, and the 3 former slaves looked shocked when Naruto spun around on the group of enemy mages instead of collapsing and sobbing in agony. His power suddenly changed from being calm and in control to being focused and irritated. He now had 2 orange fox ears and a thick, opulent foxtail with a red orb at the tip that seemed to have fire fluttering inside. Next to it was a green tail with a miniature cyclone raging inside. Naruto whispered, "Sorry, that you had to see this after I seemed so nice." Before Urza could question him, he disappeared in a tiny puff of dust and reappeared next to a flying mage, who was brandishing a long whip that was wreathed in flames as he swung it, severing anyone and everything in his path, including the wall, which had a huge rip in it that revealed the sky outside. The attack captured and burned a number of mages, and soon after, Naruto created a second whip that reflected the first's flames, making the 2 appear to writhe in the air like living things, like flaming snakes in pain. Urza's heart began to tremble as she witnessed her hero transform into a merciless killer, much like the Slavers. He would have known what to do if she had given it some real thought, even though they had attacked him and attempted to kill her, but she had turned and fled in search of Jelal. Rob, however, observed in secret admiration as Naruto appeared to move fluidly from one attack to the next, neither whip ever standing motionless for more than a second before swerving to defeat another enemy mage or to deflect an attack that would have only irritated Naruto. Since Fairy Tail was Rob's guild and he thought Naruto would fit right in, Rob intended to ask the boy what guild he belonged to and extend an invitation to him if they made it through this. When Naruto finally grew tired of the long range attack, he converted the whips into two simple steel swords without any flames or magic shrouds. He then flew away with the other mages, their swords clashing with the petrified wood staves they carried. Then came the jailers, slavers, who threw rocks and attempted to cut him with their weapons, even though he was hovering at a height of only 100 feet, well beyond the normal human throwing range. When all the mages finally fell, Naruto went back to the ground, keeping chaos mode engaged in case he needed to move quickly or if there were any unexpected attacks. He soon discovered that his instincts were correct when he found himself pursuing Urza at Rob's request, even though he would have gone anyhow because, first of all, she was at the top of the tower, where he needed to go in order to bring his mother back to life, and second, she looked like his mother, and he sensed something when he flicked her earlier. But when he reached the summit, he discovered a blue-haired boy shouting at Urza about real peace, and this is our home. He then took the cake when he declared, I'm going to bring back Zareth. Sama. Naruto lost control and slammed his fist into Jello's stomach, sending the boy flying into the wall with a huge cloud of dust rising from the impact. The possessed Jello laughed and followed Naruto, throwing punches and kicks that gradually became more and more off target until Naruto countered, slapping away a weak punch and smashing his fist in Jello's face, rattling his brains as he stumbled back, the spirit giving him power to fight Naruto. What are you doing? Urza asked, but Naruto had a plan, so he ignored her in favor of avoiding a spin kick. Naruto snarled, "Grr, just go down so I can kill." Jello tripped him with a low sweep, but the boy landed on one hand and planted both feet in Jello's chest, sending the blue net flying into the wall with a spooky smile. Jello got back up and yelled, "I can't let you kill him, he's my friend," as Naruto began to charge but Urza grabbed his hand and held him back. When Jello extended his hand and struck both of them with an invisible attack that destroyed the wall behind them, Naruto snorted and attempted to yank his hand free, but the young girl would not let go of him. This sent Urza rolling to the edge, barely holding on with both hands as the winds outside attempted to pull her away. As the battle exacerbated the wounds from his battle with the Black Dragon, Naruto snarled and wiped the blood from his mouth. Naruto said, "Fine, you want to play, I say," opening his eyes wide and transforming his sash into his signature blade. His eyes turned crimson red, and he asked rhetorically, "Let's kick it up a notch, shall we?" Before disappearing and resurfacing in front of Jello with the sword in descent as it cleaved into his side, barely missing anything because he was malnourished. That didn't stop Naruto, though, because as soon as the swing was over, he cartwheeled up and landed a falling axe on Jello's left shoulder, knocking the joint out of its socket. Jello winced slightly, then growled back and planted both palms in Naruto's chest, releasing another wave to send him flying through the hole, but this time he didn't even move. With a sly grin, Naruto passed his sword through Jello's other shoulder, causing blisters to form all over his torso as flames jumped from the blade and burned the boy's clothing. The possessed blue net finally hit the ground, but Naruto completed the move with a double falling axe kick, one hitting his gut as blood exploded from his mouth, the other hitting his broken shoulder, and the boy screaming in agony. Naruto then fell to the ground, sweeping Jello's feet out from under him and doing a handstand before spinning around to land multiple hits across Jello's body. The spirit then appeared to grow weary of the battle as it poured power into Jello's system, hissing as the boy's body gradually healed itself. But that wasn't all that happened. Jello held both of his hands in front of him, palms facing each other, and a tiny ball formed between them. Despite the pain, Jello breathed normally and threw the ball at Naruto, knocking out another wall in the process. The boy, filled with rage, chose to unleash one of his more destructive Chaos Mode attacks. When in Chaos Mode, Naruto can use his tails to form a unison raid with Kuro because they are technically in sync with each other. This is a little known fact about Chaos Mode. That's what happened at that moment. As the attack continued, Naruto's jaws seemed to dislocate as a magic circle appeared in front of his mouth. He was on all fours, his two tails bending around to point in front of his mouth as tiny green and red balls combined to form a small ball about the size of a baseball. Naruto wrapped his tongue around the ball and pulled it into his mouth, swallowing it before opening his mouth wide. But Jello was astute enough to realize that he shouldn't allow that attack to be completed, so he charged Naruto, retracted his arm, and punched the boy in the face, using his new power to crater the stone beneath Naruto. However, Naruto endured the blow and subsequent blows and completed his attack, roaring the name as a beam of wind and flames emerged, literally tearing and burning everything. Jello's body had several cuts that quickly cauterized from the flames, and his body was in excruciating pain as the wall behind him exploded outwards. Naruto smirked and stopped the attack, breathing a little heavily as he moved closer to Jello's body. The blue net trembled in agony as his body glowed red, and the spirit was trying to repair the harm that had been done. At the end, Naruto changed his voice to a low mumble and raised his fist, a small ball forming in it as he charged it to full power. He wanted to make sure this guy stayed down this time, so he yelled, "Good, now stay still while I kill you, you possessed freak. I refuse to let you bring Zareth Teme back. You'll only cause mass destruction and death if you do that." He was surprised, though, when Urza threw herself in Jello's path, protecting the boy from harm. Urza yelled, "And I can't let you hurt him, he's my friend, and so, if I must, I'll fight you to protect him, kill me if you must, but spare him," as rocks and metal fragments rose up and flew at Naruto at high speeds, creating a magic circle in front of her. In chaos mode, Naruto grinned as though that would be sufficient to deter him. He dismissed the attack, but sadly for him, the possessed Jell-El used this opportunity to channel all of his remaining energy into a single blow. He appeared in front of Naruto, his arms flat on the boy's chest, mumbling something too low to be heard, and sent Naruto flying through the tower's hole, wide-eyed, and to his death. The boy was even more shocked when he arrived at the location of the wall because he heard a faint tinkling sound, similar to broken glass, and felt a damp sensation, like mist. Subsequently, he felt the hard concrete beneath his back and the weight of a body on top of him. He opened his eyes and instinctively put his hand around the body to keep them from attacking. Two men fought behind him, one with a huge sword that Naruto suddenly wanted to make and the other with silver hair that defied gravity. But what truly shocked him was seeing a younger, less stylish version of himself, a boy who looked like Sasuke, and a girl who was an older version of Sakura when he looked back from where he had flown. The boy murmured grimly, "Grand, Kuro, I don't think we're in Fury anymore." The weight of a body fell on Naruto as he put his arms around it to keep it in place, and he crashed back first onto the concrete. He felt lumps on the person's chest as he put his arms around their body, though, and as he squeezed them, he heard a suppressed groan that made his cheeks flush. As he pushed the body off of him, a thin bluish-white line connecting to his palm, Naruto thought, "Kuso, I just felt up a girl, now I'm going to be killed for being a pervert." He then turned on his back to put his feet under and got to his feet. He noticed that the mist was beginning to clear as he brushed himself off. He leaned back when he heard something, especially since he could hear the wind whistle from the punch, which would have struck his head with significant force. As he landed on the railing of his location, he continued the backward motion by performing a back handspring to evade the subsequent sweeping kick. The silver-haired one said, "Identify yourself, or face the might of a Konoha shinobi. Zabuza, is he one of yours?" Naruto snorted at the charge. Naruto asked, hazily observing out of the corner of his eye that his lookalike was assisting the girl he threw off of him in getting up. "No, you foolish shinobi. I'm an ally of the Hidden Leaf Village. What is the situation?" He let go of chaos mode in an attempt to save energy, and Kuro landed softly on his shoulder with hardly any sound. The silver-haired man said, "We sent no requests for back up. Now identify yourself before I'm forced to put you down." Naruto noticed that the mist had nearly disappeared, and that Zabuza, the man with the giant sword, was breathing heavily and that one shoulder was bleeding heavily. Naruto said, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, and once again I state, I'm an ally of the Hidden Leaf Village. Now cease the interrogation or we'll be forced to fight, as I don't plan on becoming a prisoner without ever doing anything." He then flicked his wrist up, sword in hand, to deflect several shuriken that fell to the ground. He noticed his likeness with his arm extended as he looked at the spot where they were flung. Naruto began, "Be careful, Gaki, or you may find yourself," before he vanished in a flash of lightning. Kuro swung his tail at the silver-haired man, who defended himself with his forearms, his breath coming in short gasps, indicating that he was exhausted from the fight. But Naruto returned, his sword cutting into the younger blonde's arm. Without a hand to screw around with, Naruto's voice suddenly became icy and dropped a few decibels. A squeaky chuckle came from one side of the bridge they had selected as a battlefield, followed by the silver-haired man's announcement, "Fine, if you won't give your real name, I have no choice but to capture you for interrogation." As the small group turned to face the annoying sound, they noticed a small man with at least 300 men behind him. The short man gestured for his army of mercenaries to attack, saying, well, what have we here? You're both still alive. Oh well, I plan to kill you all anyway. This just means I'll have less to pay when everything is done and over with." Zabuza said, "Well, Kakashi, it looks like I no longer have to kill the bridge builder, so I guess we can work together now. Hear that, Haku? You can stop fighting now if you want." Haku hadn't heard because she had passed out, so he grabbed his enormous sword with one hand and charged at the approaching army by himself. As he swung his sword, killing several frontline runners who couldn't dodge in time, the renowned Demon of the Mist made the army question its chances of defeat. Kuro envelops himself in wind as he shoots a small ball of condensed wind at the army, which explodes into sharp wind blades upon impact. Hey Naruto, I'm going to help the old man before he gets himself killed, okay? Try not to get yourself killed while I'm gone, okay? Kuro said before jumping down from the bridge's edge. As Kakashi charged at him, he threw a straight punch that Naruto caught and threw back, sending a fireball after the man that he avoided with a substitution. Well, Kakashi, shall we dance? Naruto asked rhetorically. When Kakashi struck the younger man once more with a mid-level kick, Naruto skidded back, the pain not showing on his face as he blocked the next 2 blows with his sword. He counterattacked, spinning around and dragging his sword across Kakashi's midsection before puffing away in smoke that blocked Naruto's vision. He then sent a great fireball jutsu flying, colliding with his back, which would have burned the flesh if Naruto hadn't used his aura to lower the temperature just in time. In an attempt to right himself after the explosion, Naruto hardened his skin in time to block Kakashi's punch to his stomach. However, because his skin was hardened, he was unable to feel the blow, unlike Kakashi, who clutched his hand in agony after feeling the bones flare up with heat from the impact with the Aura Mage. As he disappeared in a flash, Naruto taunted, "Haha, not so powerful now, are you?" As he reappeared behind Kakashi, the sword already in mid-swing, sinking into his shoulder as he winced in pain. The wince turned into a full-fledged cry when Naruto made a second blade, which he dug into the Junin's other shoulder before making the edge jagged as he pulled them free. The blade resembled saw blades, and he laughed at the blood before shaking his head to get rid of the sadistic thoughts. Naruto thought, "What's wrong with me? I've been savoring the pain ever since I used Havoc form. I wonder if it's a side effect since I become more beast-like?" As a result, he was unable to harden or block his skin for the next attack, which sent him flying into the bridge's stone edge. Before he could concentrate, Kakashi performed a series of hand seals that were too quick for human eyes to follow, and a huge water dragon approached Naruto from behind with the intention of engulfing his body and drowning him. He raised his hands to try to block the attack, but as the water dragon started to freeze, he felt a sudden chill as icy water swept over him and then scattered across the bridge. Despite the fact that another user was only 25 feet away, Kakashi appeared taken aback by Ice Style's unexpected appearance. Naruto muttered, "Ice Make, but I haven't met any ice makers, unless," as he turned to face the girl. As he pushed himself to his feet, Naruto muttered to himself, Ice Make is rather rare, of course, I'm not in Fury any longer, but rather another dimension where I never left, Kami above, am I that obsessed with the color orange?" Naruto thrust his hand down, the sphere of pure aura grinding against the Junin's body as he was forced face first into the stone beneath foot. He held his arm behind him and formed his aura into a sphere as he vanished in a burst of pure speed to appear above Kakashi, who was too stunned to dodge his sensei's signature move. Kakashi's body went limp as he passed out from exhaustion and pain, and Naruto yelled, "Aura Sphere," as he flipped away. Before Naruto could get to Kuro's aid, a fist landed in his cheek, sending the boy into a stone barrier that broke on impact, the stone fragments digging into his body. He turned to face the person who had struck him and saw Shinobi Naruto wearing a black and red cloak of pure chakra. Naruto muttered, "Kyuubi," and then vanished in sheer speed. Sparks flew everywhere, and Naruto's blades clashed with S as he vanished. The claws of Naruto. Naruto thought of holding S after a few failed strikes. Crossing his blades as S, Naruto holds his position. Before using him as a handhold to front flip and bring his heel down on his shrouded shoulder, Naruto attempted to get past his defenses. The chakra burned his foot as he made contact. Nevertheless, he pushed his heel down despite the pain, and the younger boy's shoulder cracked in return. Angry at his ungainly appearance, after slipping past his defenses and dragging his claws across the red, orange, and blonde's leg, Naruto spun around on his heel and delivered a straight kick to his chest, sending him hurtling into the nearby forest as he pursued. Naruto hardly had time to harden his body as S before he crashed through a tree and rolled to a stop. Naruto punched him in the stomach, but the demonized shinobi's chakra gave him superpowers because blood continued to flow from his mouth as though nothing had been done. He spun on his back in response, kicking S 3 times in quick succession. The boy's ribs creaked as Naruto's skull objected to the move, but he was eventually raised enough for Naruto to get underneath him and ram his hardened head into the boy's chest. Accompanying the force, in an attempt to break the multitone-haired boy's neck, Naruto twisted his body and flipped in midair, wrapping his legs around his neck. However, as several needles formed from the hairs on his body, and by extension, his neck, Naruto grinned and attempted a new move he had thought of and wanted to test. In the tiny needles slid. Without any opposition, he screamed in agony and grabbed a tree branch, bringing it down on Naruto's head. Because of SA migraine to end all migraines planted itself firmly in his head as Naruto's legs cracked over his neck, preventing him from seeing the attack coming. He roared in pain and sunk his teeth into the demon boy's leg, drawing red-hot blood before bracing himself as he elongated his teeth with aura. He clamped his teeth down as hard as he could, ripping a chunk of the shinobi's leg out. With a tail growing behind him as his wounds started to heal, the boy let go of the aura mage with a roar louder than ever before. With a flash of increased velocity, the boy's body rose 10 feet into the air before and Naruto appeared in front of him, bringing his leg up in a standing split as his neck snapped back. Beside him, Naruto emerged, spinning to build strength before inserting his elbow into his shoulder, which resisted for a moment before rupturing. But Naruto didn't stop there. He took hold of the boy's arm and positioned it behind his back before striking the limb with full force, breaking it and causing the boy to spit blood into his mouth. The shinobi paused for a moment before swinging his tail around with the force of an ogre's strength, sending the smaller fox deep into a tree behind Naruto before he fell to the ground next to him. His strength, it far surpasses mine right now. I need to go into chaos mode. Kuro, where are you? Naruto screamed. Kuro laughed. Haha. You called? Before blood swelled from the word chips he had inserted into his body. As he coughed, he noticed the nod and grinned before transforming into blood-red sparks that encircled Naruto as steam rose from his body as a result of the cool weather and rising temperatures. The snaps and cracks of bones repairing themselves would have been audible to anyone paying close attention. Naruto stood in all his chaos mode splendor as the light show came to a close. With a fox-like smile, he produced 2 katanas, then snatched one and threw it at swinging it clean through a tree. Naruto, using his magic to set it on fire as the demonic shinobi roared in agony as he grabbed Naruto's arm and twisted it around in an attempt to snap it. Naruto destroyed it with a powerful punch, rushing the aura mage, who smiled and dodged the incoming swipes and punches before flipping over a sweeping kick and sinking his twin blades in the offending limb's ankle and kneecap. This time, though, Naruto was prepared as he let go of the blades and let his body spin in midair from the force of the demonic shinobi before slamming a heel into the younger boy's stomach, causing him to roar in pain once more. He reacted rapidly and was prepared when Naruto's returned the strike, a straight kick that made his ribs groan and sent blood gushing from his mouth, covering the shinobi's face as he let go of the mage and frantically wiped it clean. Eventually, the mist was able to remove it, and the shinobi with the Yuki turned to face his opponent. He caught a high kick to the cheek, which sent him flying into a tree. Naruto pinned him up by choking him, wincing as the evil chakra burned his hand. He tried to bear the pain by reaching behind him and creating an aura sphere, but as Naruto pushed the ball of condensed magic into the shinobi's stomach, directly over the seal that kept the Kyuubi at bay, it turned a swirling red and white, his 2 elements swirling together. Naruto's was sent by the attack through the tree, skipping across the water and crashing into a bridge support beam after spinning in midair and crashing through multiple more trees. Reminiscent of his mother telling him that this world lacked the Ethernano in the air that Earthland possessed, Naruto sighed as his magical supplies started to run low. Naruto exclaimed, I need to finish this, as he saw his opponent attempting to come up with a plan on the spot, a skill his father was naturally very good at. Of course, he had Kushina to keep the enemy at bay while he thought, but Naruto was not afforded that luxury. As he pushed the big stones off of him, Naruto saw the boy start to crawl out of the shinobi shaped indent in the stone, sending several of them into the water. As he saw his target, straight ahead down a long, transparent tunnel created by his flight, the boy grinned. He tensed his legs and launched himself at Naruto, who moaned before snatching the attacking boy and choking him before he hit the ground. He mentally communicated with Kuro as he paced his hand over the seal, which started to glow an unholy black. Kuro nodded mentally as Naruto breathed heavily, trying to concentrate all of his energy on this final task. Are you ready for this? If it works, it could end up corrupting you. Then again, it could make you more powerful. I won't force you to do it, but if I don't do this, I'll have to kill him, and something just feels wrong about killing yourself, even if it's not really me. Naruto yelled, Secret Aura Art. Aura Cleansing. Acting as Naruto's appeared perplexed as the Yuki around him started to swirl up his victim's arm. This weak, pitiful piece of shit was robbing him of his power. The corrupted boy appeared to be struck by that thought as he started to writhe, pain shooting through his body as Kyuubi's destructive influence was removed from his character. The demon fox moaning as a blonde once again crushed his hopes of escape. Naruto's was the final Yuki to be released. Both the shinobi and the aura mage lost consciousness as they escaped from its grasp and disappeared up Naruto's arm. However, Kuro emerged in a tiny puff of smoke, coughing the offending material out of his lungs, after Naruto released his chaos mode. As Kuro sat and waited for the mage to awaken, he looked down at his partner, sighed, and then pushed the extra magic into Naruto's body by placing the tip of his tail at the back of his neck, exactly where the spinal column and brainstem joined. The boy's magic reserves gradually refilled. The boy's eyes opened at last, and he sat up startled as a surge of energy filled his body. When he sat up so abruptly, he heard a faint oof and turned to see Kuro on the ground, thrown off of him. He noticed Naruto looking around, breathing regularly, lying down, and the Yuki gone, all of which suggest that everything is alright. With a sigh of relief, he forced himself to stand, his muscles complaining of the strain, swaying on his unsteady legs as blood started to trickle down. Since he was quite a distance from the original battlefield, he steadied himself and started to walk towards the bridge while toting the younger boy over his shoulder like a bag of potatoes. Gradually, he increased his pace to a jog. When he reached the shore, he stiffened his legs and leapt at the bridge, aiming for the indentation left by his battle. His shoe caught the edge as he leapt straight up, and he hauled both himself and Naruto by launching one hand out to grab the railing. And Kuro over the metal, already complaining about his muscles. He felt a cold metal press against his neck as he struggled to stand again. He looked forward and saw that the Teme was still down, the girl was still watching over the bridge builder, and the ice wielder was crouching over a body. Likely Zabuza's, so Kakashi was left as the constant source of trouble. A plan instantly sprang to mind, and he carried it out. Previously, his muscles protested, but during the battle with the shinobi boy, fresh life flooded his veins and his thoughts were few. He threw Naruto struck as he slid beneath Kakashi's guard, standing up behind him, a fireball forming in his hand, which he held up to Kakashi's head, demonstrating the heat, after Kakashi was forced to move the kunai in order to catch his student. He caught the attacking clone by the neck without even looking, causing a stream of blue to run down his arm to the fusion point on his neck. Ice formed from his hand as ice claws emerged, skewering the clone. Kuro's eyes widened as Naruto rattled off details like a book. Shadow Clone Jutsu, a jutsu where one forms a solid clone from their chakra, is able to return memories to creator upon dispelling. A forbidden Konoha technique due to the high cost of chakra per clone. A smirk appeared on Naruto's face as he snarled at something, slinging his hand over the pair, and a wall of ice formed at his command. Cool, it would appear that attempting to copy the shadow clone actually caused its enhanced learning abilities to copy instead. This could help me in the future, especially since it isn't an actual aura, and it therefore won't occupy one of my spaces. Senbon embedded themselves in the ice, cracking spiderwebs across the thin sheet before Kakashi could inquire about it. Naruto could have created a better and thicker shield, but doing so would have required more magical energy, which he didn't have much of. Naruto let the ice fall and glared at the assailant, only to see the previous girl standing there with her hand extended and her eyes wide with either shock or incredulity. Taking advantage of her brief moment of distraction, she wrapped the fireball, wielding hand around Kakashi's neck, allowing the fire to extinguish. Kakashi hissed through his mask before being flung off the bridge, still holding Naruto to his body, but his hand was still heated from the close proximity to the flames. Naruto used the mental connection to send a message to Kuro, who nodded indiscernibly to everyone but Naruto before leaping off his shoulder and firing a tiny ball of condensed air at the tip of his tail at Kakashi. The blonde and Naruto flew through the air and into a number of trees that eventually collapsed due to the fighting. As the aura wielding duo assumed their respective positions, Naruto snarled, "I sense uncertainty, little girl. Is there something you wish to say before your life is taken from you?" Kuro mirrored his expression. The girl squealed almost fangirlishly before disappearing in a flash of speed. She then reappeared in front of Naruto and gave him a warm embrace that suggested they had been friends for years rather than two near strangers. "Another one, I found, another ice-style user," she exclaimed. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't have this ice style that you mentioned. I'm from a separate universe, where people use powers like yours through magic. People who use ice like you are called ice makers," Naruto admitted as she relaxed her grasp. The girl's tone sounded almost melancholy as Naruto wiped his face and his hand came away wet with tears. "Oh, so I'm still alone in the world, but I saw you use ice. Does that mean you are an ice maker, as you said?" she asked. With tears streaming down the girl's face, Naruto rubbed a tiny circle in her back and said, "Not exactly, but that's a bit much to get into right now. I take it from your previous hopefulness that you don't have any more family members like yourself." "No, I don't have anyone left. My 2.san, he killed my mother, and he tried to kill me, but I killed him first. That's when my powers manifested. After that, I felt like a killer and tried to end my life, but Zabuza Sama found me and raised me. He gave me a home and attention and even affection. But now, he's dead. I have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I'm just a broken weapon once again." The little girl wept as her tears fell in tiny waterfalls. "Oh, you poor dear, to have lost your parents at such a young age. I lost my parents recently, yesterday in fact. But I suppose if you want, we can be lonely together. I don't have any family left, other than Kuro, my battle partner, and he doesn't really count as family since he's part animal. So, how about it, Hyo-chan? Do you want to come back to my world with me? There are plenty of ice makers for you to get acquainted with in Earthland." Naruto inquired as he sat down and extended to the child who was staring at the limb as if it were a serpent. The girl now known as Haku muttered to herself, "Family, you want me to be part of your family, even after I attacked you. You want Haku to be your sister?" Before leaping at Naruto and giving him another hug, tears running down her cheeks as she squeezed the boy as tightly as she could, causing his bones to creak under the force of her love. "Yes, Haku wants to be a part of your family. I want to be a member of your family. I want to go to this new world, and meet these ice makers, and grow up into the daughter my mother would be proud of. I want to grow stronger, to be the most powerful ice mage in this land, in memory of my master Zabuza, and to the strange boy Naruto. I will have to make lots of friends, and have many precious people, starting of course with you." Haku wept as she once more hugged Naruto, time bringing Kuro into the embrace. An enraged Sakura descended on her previous position with a kunai, fiery hatred in her eyes as she slammed the metal weapon down, the sharp edge sinking into Naruto's shoulder as Haku gasped, and Naruto gave the girl a smile before pushing her away. She questioned, "What? Why?" as Naruto promptly punched Sakura in the stomach, avoiding her chest. As he stitched the skin together and held the wound closed to allow it to heal, Naruto shot back, "Aw, what's a little blood between family members? I'm willing to die for my precious people, so don't worry about it." Before gasping and pushing him to the ground, Haku rubbed her eyes and said, "Brother, you did this for me, and I don't even know your name." She then threw her body over his in a protective position. A lightning encased hand was sent through Haku's chest area, causing blood to drip from both the wound and her mouth as she started coughing up blood. Naruto began, "What's the mat, Haku?" before yelling as blood covered his face. Kakashi was looking at the owner of that hand when he was abruptly pinned to the stone with a flaming axe separating it from his body. Naruto had designed the pain to be excruciatingly painful, but the fire wasn't strong enough to cauterize the wound. Naruto commanded his partner, Kuro, try and figure what needs to be done. The little fox pardoned him because of the pressure of the circumstance. Naruto howled as he pulled the axe free and spun it effortlessly to deflect a hail of shuriken from Sakura. He then slung the blade parallel to the ground, sending a wave of flames off the blade. "Now then, you better hope she comes out of this alive, or I'm going to make you regret ever being born, Kakashi," he said. When Sakura got to the flames, she sank to her knees, slid across the slippery stone, and threw another kunai at Naruto. The boy dodged the metal by flicking his axe up, but he grabbed the weapon in midair and sent it back at her, who performed a backhand spring to avoid it, her hair falling freely as she floated in midair. Naruto recognized her eyes as he looked at her face. They were all pale white, with no pupils visible. When Kakashi attempted to escape, Naruto grunted and tightened his hold on him. She unconscious, probably from the stress, but her body says to fight, most likely to kill the one who killed that boy over there. She probably had a crush on him, and now I have to deal with this annoyance, along with a homicidal silver head, and a blonde with an obsession with orange. His voice and expression reminded Kakashi of the time his sensei's girlfriend had her lady time, as he hissed out his command while looking straight into his eyes. The Junin nodded in response. "You, stay down, or I'm going to remove those legs so you can't run away anymore. Got it, Kakashi?" Before Sakura could react, the icicles grew through her and joined back together on the other side, holding her motionless as pain pulsed through her body. Naruto turned to face Sakura as he punched the ground, an idea developing in his mind. She was unable to create any seals because her hands were separated, but she would survive because her blood had frozen at the puncture sites, probably leaving her permanently scarred. Naruto yelled, "Grand, the sadistic streak has worked its way out of my system. Now then, next problem, Kakashi, how about you do me a favor and stay down this time," as he grabbed the Junin by the neck and threw him down the bridge. To add more spin to the attack, he punched the older man straight, sending a fist of ice flying from his fist, smashing into his chest, breaking at least 2 ribs in the process. As Naruto's face appeared to collapse and his spirit seemed to break into a million fragments, Kuro declared solemnly, "Naruto, I can't, her heart, it got her heart. He seemed to be trying to will Kakashi to death by glaring at him, and he felt sorry for Sakura because she appeared to be a coward and most likely wouldn't have attacked him in a public battle. A memory rose on the pain of loss as Naruto sobbed and slammed his fists into the stone as his agony surged through his body. A recollection of one of his final lessons, a method his mother had explained to him, and the risks involved. As Haku muttered the name of the attack, Naruto screamed and pressed his lips to his, saying, "It's worth it. I refuse to lose someone else today." He then raised his head and body up, raised his hands to the sky, and cried out the name of his technique. Forbidden Aura Art. Auramancer's Last Resort. Soul Division. The words caused his body to tremble, and his mouth widened until it could fit an apple through his lips without ever touching them. Light then appeared to pour from his mouth, crawling across Haku's body and into the hole where her heart was. If one were to look inside her at that moment, they would see that her body was growing back all of its parts, including the skin. The light appeared to go out just as it was finished, and Naruto collapsed onto the stone, unconscious and slack. Sweat literally poured from his body like a wet rag as the move took its toll on him. Haku felt the area, feeling nothing, and looked around, not intending to have survived the attack. She turned when she heard something hit the damp stone and saw Naruto sprawled on it, his body slack. When Haku attempted to shake him awake, her body seized and she fell on the boy, screaming, "Naruto! Naruto! Naruto!" She felt as though she was being sucked inwards, and then her body was burning, freezing, and then exploding outwards. She questioned, "What's happening?" As Kuro appeared suddenly, sitting serenely on Naruto's body. "He split his soul for you, to fix the damage done to your body. The pain you feeling an after effect, due to the foreign presence, your body is sending all available resources to oust the intruder. However, the technique won't let that happen, and your body is slowly being converted to our standard. Sorry, Naruto forgot to mention that one can't just learn magic with a magical core, and now, yours is that heart. Now then, how do we get home?" Kuro replied, but Haku's hand was on his. Made him pause and give her a look. The girl tried to sit up, but the pain was so great that she fell back like a dead fish. But why would he do that for me? We just met, and what will it do to his body?" she asked. "Oh, the first part is quite simple, my dear. You agreed to be Naruto's family, something he treasures above anything else, even his own health. The second part, however, I'm afraid that is more drastic. One does not simply divide their souls with severe consequences. In this case, that is that he'll lose a majority of his power and magical reserves. Years of training put behind him, he'll now have to relive, only without a teacher this time. How powerful he is when this is all over, depends entirely on how badly he wants it, I suppose." Kuro responded prior to returning to the job of getting the group back to Earthland. His body was glowing and flickering, and Kuro thought, I didn't tell her that his soul will start affecting her growth patterns, nor that dividing his soul can only be done 3 times in one's life. Then, if he were to divide his soul, either he would die, or go into a coma for the rest of his life. As the bodies of Naruto and Haku also began to glow, Kuro declared, "Oh, I believe that is our ride home now." As the 3 bodies disappeared in a flash of light, he muttered ominously, "I just wonder. Time flows differently between worlds, so where will we return to, the day we left, or even the year?" Returning to Earthland 4 years later before 3 bodies suddenly materialized and fell into the ocean below, birds were flying around peacefully. With a sigh, Naruto gazed at his open palms, where 2 balls, one of ice and one of fire, formed roughly half an inch above the extremities. Almost to the day, 3 years had passed since he was returned to Earthland. When he returned, he started to inquire as to when he had come through, only to discover that 4 years had gone by without him. He also recalled severing his soul in order to heal Haku, who had reportedly come through for him after declaring her desire to remain with her brother. Additionally, he had gone back to the small island where his parents had perished and discovered that their bodies had deteriorated due to time and the storms that had undoubtedly hit the island. For roughly a week, Naruto had been depressed, regretting that he had not been able to keep 2 of his most valued people safe. But when Haku held him while he sobbed and wiped away the tears with his fluffy tail, he was lifted out of his depression. Kuro didn't express it, but he was also upset because of how it affected his best friend Naruto. After crying for several hours, Haku took Naruto to the coast, where he discovered multiple graves. One for Zabuza, who Haku considered a father figure, and one for both of his parents. After that, Naruto had put himself to the test by using Kuro's fire and wind abilities to create a huge glass dome that covered the island. He was unable to complete the dome, though, because it had a car-sized hole in the roof. It was a real marvel and ought to accomplish its goal of shielding the island from the weather. However, Naruto and his companions soon left the island in search of housing. Before joining a guild, Naruto wanted to resume his training and regain his previous strength. Haku was willing to accompany him in learning ice make and honing her ice style, which helped him learn how to use it as well, though he changed it to suit his fighting style. 3 months or so after the return, Naruto was working at a shop in Harjin town, doing manual labor and stocking shelves. Despite the shopkeeper's propensity to give Haku lustful glances, they offered a place to sleep. A year or so later, he was elevated to the position of shop manager, and the shopkeeper took a lengthy vacation to a place called Dominguez. Naruto was surprised to be in charge of the entire shop while the old man was away because the old man usually pretended to despise Naruto. Nonetheless, Naruto was a responsible individual who had raised the caliber of the goods offered for sale at the store. One positive aspect of the circumstance was that Naruto was able to acquire a number of nearby businesses whose proprietors were approaching retirement age. By purchasing them out, the store expanded into one of Harjin town's bigger establishments, and Naruto was well liked by the shipping industry because of his propensity to purchase expensive goods that brought in a lot of money. However, the shop owner had returned today and was furious that Naruto had made too much work for him to handle in his old age, which made Naruto unhappy. Naruto heard the doorbell ding and looked to see the customer who had entered the small front office that he had made out of his room. Of course, he didn't complain when he saw the revenue report, which was bordering into the 100,000 jewels per month. Naruto thought dejectedly. Only to watch a different kind of customer come in. Typically, middle-aged and older Earthland residents came to buy groceries. He occasionally received a young man who was searching for training books or, in the event that he was unable to use magic himself, magical objects. The number of kids who had visited to buy a pet or pet supplies was as many as he could count on 2 hands. The number of young ladies who had arrived with their boyfriends to model clothing was as numerous as he could count on 1 hand. One such woman was standing in front of him now, but she wasn't dangling from the arm of a muscular head. Her brown eyes gleamed in the sunlight as she surveyed the tiny space, which was filled with various trash. Her blonde hair was shoulder length, with a small portion secured with a blue ribbon in a ponytail on her right side. Her attire, which included a large blue band across her chest that accentuated her hourglass figure and a sleeveless white top with blue lines around it, matched the ribbon. A brown belt around her waist seemed to support her short blue skirt. Naruto blushed when he saw the black whip on one side of the belt. However, he noticed multiple celestial keys on the opposite side, indicating that she was a celestial mage. Before a pair of black leather, high-heeled boots blocked Naruto's view, her smooth, creamy skin from mid-thigh to just below her knees was revealed. Overall, she was a pretty girl who would probably get even more attractive as she grew older. Naruto felt his cheeks heat up as she met his eyes directly, her face marred by a questioning expression, but otherwise she looked adorable. As Naruto leaned back in his chair and interlocked his fingers behind his head, he did his best not to blush when he looked at the girl. "Hello, may I speak to the owner of the shop?" she asked. Using his manners, Naruto pulled a small rectangle out from under the counter and pulled up the search engine. "I can get the owner, but if you are looking to buy something, I'm the manager as well as the only one who can properly use the system to get whatever it is that you require, madam." As she leaned forward on the counter, giving Naruto a brief glimpse of her cleavage, the girl said, "Oh, well, I guess you could help me then. Can you tell me if you have any celestial spirit keys available, gold ones preferably?" in an attempt to get Naruto to assist her. Before locating the celestial spirit keys he sought, Naruto's fingers darted across the screen, searching their enormous inventory. "Hold on a sec." Naruto read from the page and rang up both items as the girl appeared to be considering them. "Yeah, we got 2 keys, both silver though. One we've had for a while, so I may be able to cut you a deal as we don't get that many, if any, celestial mages in here. The other we just received from overseas and not much is known about it other than the spirit is a female. If you buy them together, I may be able to cut the price in half, simply because you seem like a nice girl." With a hint of fear, she inquired, "How much for both keys?" If he was telling the truth, the cost would undoubtedly be very high, possibly more than she was prepared to pay without disclosing who she was. Together, the price comes to 3,500 jewels as the girl's eyes widened and her mouth hung open. Then Naruto moved his finger, and chuckled. "Sorry, finger got in the way." The girl's jaw dropped for a completely different reason, and her eyes widened even more as Naruto said, "The price is actually 350,000 jewels." She tried to woo Naruto by playing on his masculinity, which he cursed as he pressed a few buttons on the device. Her eyes then took on a mischievous gleam as she lifted one creamy leg onto the counter and placed a hand behind her head. She pouted and smiled while pushing her chest forward. "Would you like to make the payment now?" The new price is 2 million jewels. Naruto sat up and asked, his expression shifting to one of business as Kuro's key swung forward and settled over his chest, the red metal contrasting with the black shirt Naruto wore underneath his navy blue jacket, a pair of loose black pants held up by Naruto's yellow sash on the lower body, and a pair of burnt orange sneakers on his feet. When the girl nodded, she handed over a card that Naruto only looked at once before returning it to her and pointing to a sign that said, "Cash only," over the entrance. The girl at least had the grace to blush and apologize because she didn't actually have any money before an idea struck her. "You don't have a machine to accept credit cards, but you have a huge system to find and retrieve items from the back," the girl said, perplexed, and Naruto nodded, blushing. Indeed, Owner.san believes that cards are overrated because they could be stolen, as if you couldn't use their money in the same way. "In any case, I'll work out a deal with you because I can tell you want the keys." As the girl turned beet red and steam poured out of her ears, Naruto's own naughty side came out. "I'll buy the keys for you, and you can pay me back in other ways." When her chocolate eyes saw the key around his neck, she opened her mouth to threaten him with sexual harassment, but she was also offended that he thought she was that easy, even though she really wanted the keys and was grateful that he was trying to help. "Oh, so you're also a celestial mage?" As Naruto met her gaze and she saw how deep the blue orbs appeared to be, she asked, secretly thrilled to meet another mage who shared her use of magic, to the point where she forgot the anger of his previous statement. "Not exactly, I used something similar called familiars, which is a special branch of spirits. This is my partner, Kuro, who has disappeared for the moment," Naruto said as he caught the key between two fingers as he felt the warmth spreading through the key, letting him know that Kuro was happy. "Now, let me return to my initial offer and tell you something. I'll give you the older one, and you can let me get to know you over lunch," Naruto suggested as he stood and stretched, his stomach grumbling. "Are you referring to a date?" As Naruto walked around the counter and tapped a button to announce that he was heading to lunch, the girl asked. "When two people who are attracted to one another go out on a date, they typically go out to eat together. Do you mean that you feel something for me?" she stammered as she looked at Naruto, who teased her by grabbing her hand and putting a silver key inside. She was so taken aback by the situation that she failed to notice him palming something and putting it in a pocket on his jacket. After he left, she followed him as he made his way to the town's restaurant district. "Are you implying that you feel something for me?" As Naruto paused for a second before turning right as they cut through an alley towards the sector, the girl teased back. Even though he was several inches taller than the blonde girl, Naruto thought, she's got a mischievous nature too, how delightful. He spun on his heel, his head barely an inch from hers. "Naruto, call me Naruto." The girl blushed before Naruto punched the wall, causing dust to explode as he did so. "And how could someone like me not find you beautiful, madam?" Naruto asked. "Whodu, Naruto, are you already eating lunch?" As he looked at his watch, the man inside said. A waiter appeared to take their orders in a matter of seconds as Naruto ordered 2 bowls of ramen and a glass of soda, while the girl ordered a salad and tea. Naruto said, "No, I took an early lunch to get to know my new friend." The girl hid behind him in fear as he sat down at a booth, mirroring his actions. "You already know my name, so tell me yours and we can proceed from there." The girl nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere, so Naruto made the suggestion. As she drummed her fingers nervously on the table, the now named Lucy said, "Lucy, you can call me Lucy." Naruto noticed how neatly her nails were done. Lucy asked what aura magic was, and Naruto abruptly paid attention when he said, "And as you know, I'm Naruto, and I use aura magic." As their order arrived, Naruto thanked the waiter, who nodded in agreement. "Well, you'll just have to wait and find out. I came to get to know you, not the other way around." Over the course of the following hour, Lucy ate her salad and told Naruto about herself, the magic she used, and her aspirations to become a successful novelist and join Fairy Tail, a magic guild based in Magnolia, a big city in Fury. Naruto ate his bowls of ramen, eating slowly so as not to frighten her. Naruto had an idea before they heard the door open, and as they looked around their booth, they saw a young man with pink, spiky hair, face down, and a body hit the floor. Naruto sighed and stepped out of the booth to assist the young man in getting to his feet, bringing him back to the booth with the boy's little blue cat in tow. After putting him down, Naruto ordered some food for the boy and some fish for the cat. Going back to their earlier chat, Naruto told Lucy about himself, including his aspirations to become the Aura King and join a guild, as well as a brief description of his magic. He did not, however, tell the blonde about his parents, Haku, or his later traveling exploits. When food finally arrived, the boy became animated and introduced himself as Natsu, while the cat was introduced as Happy. The two of them started eating as if it were their last meal, and after ordering dessert for himself and Lucy, Naruto got to know Natsu as he could assure them that he had heard of him previously. After an additional hour, Natsu was finally satisfied when Naruto took out his wallet and gave it to the waiter, telling him to keep a quarter of the money for himself because he appeared somewhat unkempt from rushing back and forth to get food for Natsu. Naruto also took out a large roll of jewels. After that, Natsu returned to searching for any indications of his father, Dragon, Igneel, while Lucy went to the town park to do whatever she felt worthy of doing and Naruto returned to the shop. When Naruto returned to the shop, he spoke with the owner about his idea, and the owner gave him a disdainful look. "Observe her, Gaki. I abandoned you for 2.5 years, but you returned the favor by giving me more work as I grew older, and now you're requesting to relocate to Magnolia in order to open a new store." The elderly man screamed, and Naruto returned his irate look with a bored one. "I'm telling you that I'm moving to Magnolia, not that I'm requesting to leave. More clients, more revenue, and a larger city." In order to avoid having his plan thwarted, Naruto crossed his arms and said, "If you don't like the deal, let me buy the shop and you can go and spy on women in the bathhouse or whatever it is that you perverts do." "No, look here, you little brat. I've worked hard for years to establish this place's reputation, and I'm not going to let you ruin it." With a clatter of noise, the elderly man said as he hurriedly got out of his chair. "You and I have both spent years. One way or another, you old geezer, I'm leaving today, and you can't stop me. Instead of you, I am the person that people trust, the face of this place, and its spirit. Nobody even knows your name anymore. You could pass away at any moment and no one would ever know. Your customers will accompany me if I go. While you've been gone for 2 years, growing more wrinkled, crotchy, and perverted, I've invested my blood, sweat, and tears into this place, growing it into what it is today. Now, a huge train named Naruto is approaching on this small track. You have to move out of my way or I'll crush you so thoroughly that you resemble the repulsive worm that you are." The old man became enraged and exploded, his fist flashing through the air as he witnessed Naruto fly through the wall in response to Naruto's yell. Only, that didn't happen as Naruto barely moved his head to the side, grasping the old man's wrist as he whipped him over his shoulder, sending the geezer flying against the wall as a two-pronged pitchfork formed in his hands, Naruto skewering the wall on either side of the man's neck as he hung there. Naruto took the paper and pen from the desk and said, "Now then, sign the business over into my name, or you find yet another useless hole in you. Go to hell." As Naruto grabbed his trusty rectangular device from a nearby table, his fingers vanished in pure speed as he composed a message, admitting that his boss was heavily involved in drug, human, and other illegal trafficking. The old man hissed out and then spat in Naruto's face, causing the bi-colored boy to lose it and tear the man from the wall as he pinned him to the desk with the pens. Naruto then tapped the send button, sending the message to the local Rune Knight's office via the electronic airwaves. "Well, this is a better way to do it. If you don't end up on Runhill Island, you'll discover how popular slave traffickers are behind bars, and I get to keep my money out of your dirty hands." With a menacing grin, Naruto turned to depart, then quickly pivoted on his heel and positioned his foot between the elderly man's legs, cursing him to the depths of the underworld. Naruto said, "You should be careful, Danzo-san, your horns are showing." He left the private office and went back to his room to start packing his belongings. He had learned to travel light over the years because he could make most of the necessities out of thin air. Basically, he brought a picture of himself and his parents before they passed away, his prized rectangular device that was connected to the enormous sorting system he had created for the company, and a few changes of clothes. He also carried Kuro's key, but it hung around his neck nearly all day. He sighed as he walked out the door, watching the sky grow darker as night fell, his bag on his back, a familiar weight resting on his shoulder, and the fluffy tail brushing against his cheek. As Naruto started to move through the town, he greeted one of his closest friends. "Hello, Furball." The fox gave him a stern look. "Well, Magnolia. Would a certain blonde have anything to do with this decision to move?" Kuro inquired as Naruto froze and went back to the store as he taped a paper to the front door telling all of the devoted customers that Naruto had to move to Magnolia due to the arrest of the shop owner and that he had left the signal for his transmiton Lacrima so that they could still place orders. Naruto left the note and went to the park to see Lucy, but on the way he noticed a boat leaving port, so he turned to Kuro, who nodded and lifted his rear into the air as his tail started to spin like a helicopter, lifting the two of them as Kuro piloted towards the yacht. Alongside Lucy as the group of slave traders gathered around her, Bora turned back to her and threw her celestial spirit keys out the open window, merely staring at her with disdain. "So, where were we? Oh, yeah, guys, knock her out." When the roof collapsed, exposing a 19-year-old boy with two different hair colors, blonde on one side and red on the other. with an orange streak down the middle. Bora gave the order. Lucy attempted to fight off the group of burly men, but their strength overcame her as she fell. With a single snap of his fingers, ice exploded from the ground, followed by fierce flames as the men leapt away from Lucy, and Naruto glared at the gathered group of men. "Hey Lucy, how are you?" As soon as the rage left his face, Naruto asked, lifting Lucy up and holding her bridal style before rushing out the door and kicking it down with his boot as he entered the next room. Seeing all the unconscious women, he carried Lucy close to his chest. He turned around when he heard the sound of shoes clomping on wood, placing Lucy's body on a handy armchair and glaring at the group of men obstructing the path back to Bora. "Okay now you brat, just give up and this won't hurt near as bad." One man cracked his knuckles, but a pink blur piled up and drove him into the ship, smashing the other men as they fell after him, leaving only Bora and a familiar blue cat, as well as Kuro on the top of the ship, looking through the hole in the roof. "Natsu, it's great to see you. I hope you can handle this. Goodbye." As he scooped up Lucy and leapt through the hole, giving her to Happy, who had a pair of angelic white wings sprout from his back, Naruto said, before the boy could respond. "Do you believe you can carry Lucy back to shore, Happy?" The cat nodded and took Lucy's hand as he attempted to fly back to shore, the blonde hanging limply from him as his wings flapped more forcefully than usual to support the additional weight. "I would take her, but Kuro can't carry more than one person at a time," Naruto said. Kuro picked him back up, and Naruto watched as he flew towards the shore. However, Happy's wings disappeared in tiny puffs of smoke, and Lucy and the cat fell into the ocean. Happy sank like a rock, and Lucy briefly splashed around as the water woke her. She swam down, probably to get her keys, and Naruto saw her disappear beneath the surface as she regained her bearings. Seeing that whatever happened next would surely be too big and destructive, Naruto and Kuro headed for the shore as they landed safely, the fox's tails returning to normal as he sat on Naruto's shoulder while Lucy called forth the spirit of Aquarius, who created a tidal wave to destroy the ship. As Naruto finger flicked him off his shoulder and complained about baka foxes, Kuro muttered, "Grand, your girlfriend likes to overdo things, just like you." Kuro had a point, though, because Naruto thought the wave was enormous. She was Aquarius's spirit, so her power was directly influenced by Lucy's magical reserves. Nevertheless, Naruto was moved to confront his inner feelings as he avoided wood that washed up on the shore as the boat was destroyed, the bodies scattered across the sand, and he looked down to see Lucy wash up at his feet as he pulled her to her feet, slightly heating his hands as he tried to dry her off. He watched as Bora stood up, but Natsu smashed his face in with his flaming fist as he looked down the beach. "Oh, I see. At last, I recalled where I had seen him." As Bora threatened to use the might of Fairy Tail to fall on Natsu if he persisted in fighting him, Lucy watched the battle because she wanted to witness the power of a Fairy Tail mage, as Natsu didn't appear to be the type to back down from a fight. Naruto was interrupted. "How dare you, you can make fun of me, Igneel, and even those girls, but you never make fun of Fairy Tail's bonds. Yours truly will beat the living daylights out of anyone who does that." Natsu yelled as he began to sprint towards Bora, who scowled briefly at his trick's failure before launching a fierce flame attack at him, covering the boy's body with explosions as Lucy screamed. "Why didn't you avoid that, Natsu?" As Lucy began to run in the direction of the boy, Happy appeared and landed on her head, interrupting her as she asked, "Oh, he's all right." Lucy stared at him bewilderedly as the little blue cat remarked, "There's nothing Natsu likes more than fighting, aside from maybe eating, but that's debatable." Her focus then shifted to the loud sound of inhalation, and she felt her jaw drop as Natsu swallowed the flames while grimacing and wiping his mouth. "What's wrong with you, Yek?" Natsu looked angrily and said, "Those flames were so weak and disgusting, I feel sorry for you, man." Naruto then summoned a ball of fire the size of his head and threw it at Natsu, who smiled and ate the flames, sighing with satisfaction as they vanished down his gullet, burping a little. "Ah, much better, see he knows how to train his fire," Natsu said. "I'm so fired up now." Natsu shouted as he set his legs apart, bracing them against the ground as he inhaled deeply, forming a tube with his hands as a magic circle formed at the end as he exhaled. A long stream of fire flying through the air towards Bora, who barely managed to dodge. "Fire dragon's roar!" Natsu yelled as he leapt at the flying Bora, launching flame gouts at the man, who ducked as he shot back. How on earth did Natsu accomplish that? Why didn't it burn him when he was struck earlier, and how is it possible for him to consume fire? As Happy described that Natsu was a dragon slayer. A mage who employed dragon-slaying arts, a lost magic, Lucy inquired. With a nod of approval, Lucy and Naruto returned their attention to the battle just as Natsu struck Bora in the face with his fire. Encased fist, knocking him to the ground. He completed the move by swinging his arms clockwise at his sides, leaving fire trails behind him as he slammed the attack down, destroying multiple houses and knocking Bora unconscious. Fire Dragon's Wing Strike. Natsu yelled as he touched down, and Happy landed on his shoulder. Hey, you mentioned wanting to be a part of Fairy Tail. Natsu grinned at Lucy, who gave him a stupid nod. Naruto grinned next to the blonde, crossing his arms. Natsu took off as soon as he heard the Rune Knights coming, catching Lucy's hand as she fluttered along behind him. Naruto followed suit as they fled the crime scene. Come on, Fairy Tail could always use some more pals. As they ran, Lucy tried to hang on while Naruto laughed under his breath and Natsu yelled with excitement. Naruto looked up at the night sky and swore he saw a star flash at him. Yeah, love you too Mom, Dad. Naruto said as he ran with his new friend and future guildmate. Yep, definitely going to be fun now. As he stood in front of the big doors leading into Fairy Tail, Naruto sighed. He had promised himself more than anyone else that he would come today, and he never broke his word, even if he didn't think it through before making it. About a week prior, his new friend Lucy had joined the guild and had found Naruto, asking him to join as well so they could be guild mates. Naruto had promised the girl that he would join, but he had other things to do first, like setting up shop in Magnolia, transferring ownership of the warehouse in Harjin Town to himself through a contact he had in the Rune Knights, and writing letters to Haku to inform her of his move to Magnolia. Now, a week later, Naruto stood in front of the doors, trying to calm his nerves. Kuro, who usually took pride in his fearless demeanor, had even stayed behind at the shop to get some sleep, but for some reason, the thought of joining a guild made him shiver. Then, he forced them down as he pressed one hand to the doors and pushed them open, the daylight shining through the open doors as the entire guild fell silent as they looked at Naruto, who waved and smiled as Lucy got up and ran to him, pulling him inside with a firm grip on his wrist. The guild seemed to approve of that, and they returned to their activities as Naruto was pulled through the actual crowd to a counter where a white-haired girl was standing drying glasses. Lucy paused in front of the counter and sat down, gesturing for Naruto to follow suit, and the boy complied by pulling his cloak and out from under him and letting it hang to the ground. Lucy spoke to the bargirl as if they were best friends, saying, "Hey Mira, this is the boy I was telling you about." Naruto explained that it was because they were fellow guild members. "Is this Naruto? I wonder? I understand your strong desire for him to accompany us." As she continued to smile at Lucy, who turned red, Mira said, "You had better be careful, or someone might steal him away." Am I? Mira, what do you mean by y.y.y.at? Mira nodded knowingly as her focus turned to Naruto, and Lucy sputtered, "I don't think of Naruto Sama like that. However, she calls you Naruto Sama. Let's get back to business. You want to be a part of Fairy Tail? A family might be nice," Naruto thought as he looked around the room, picking out people at a glance, while everyone drank beer and ate food. Mira asked as Naruto nodded and looked around the room. Natsu was there, his head pressed against another boy's, sparks flying between their eyes, the other boy's dark hair, cargo pants, and apparent lack of shirt, revealing a muscular torso. Off at another table, a brunette girl with a barrel upside down, drinking its contents and setting it down at last with a satisfied erp. At another table, a white-haired boy who resembled Mira, probably her brother, was shouting things about being a man. Back at Natsu's table, Naruto saw Happy eating fish, and in one corner, a boy surrounded by several women, his fingers ringed. Then, as the information about each person's aura returned to Naruto, he closed his eyes and muttered a silent aura whisper, as a pulse of his magical energy spread out like ripples in the water. Naruto took out a book and scribbled in it as Lucy tried to peek over his shoulder, but he quickly closed it and put it back in his pocket. He listed the people in the order he saw them: Dragon Slayer magic, Ice Make, Card magic, Take Over magic, and Era magic. Naruto turned back to Mira, the white-haired girl still grinning, but the last one felt strange, almost like the boy was dying, and he was unable to sense any magical orientation like he could with the others. Naruto smiled and said, "Yeah, I do want to join Fairy Tail. I could use some family and friends." Mira nodded and took a stamp from beneath the counter. Mira said, "Okay, where would you like your mark, Naruto-san?" As Naruto turned around and pointed to his back while taking off his shirt and cloak. Mira noticed the other marks there and positioned the stamp beneath them, creating the orange guild mark with the black outline. As Naruto did so, temporarily forgetting his shirt and cloak, she removed the stamp and said he could turn around. Lucy blushed slightly upon seeing Naruto's bare chest and made a conscious effort to memorize the image. She seemed indifferent to Natsu or Gray doing it, but now that Naruto was shirtless, she was flushed like a schoolgirl, and the blonde was scolding herself for it. Lucy blushed, and Mira smirked as she put the stamp back. She leaned on the counter and glanced at Naruto, who saw that the action made her breasts flatten against the wood. Quickly turning his head away, he found himself staring at Lucy's arms folded beneath her own breasts as he shook his head free, and Mira grinned again at their mutual affection. As Naruto considered his responses, Mira questioned, "So, what kind of magic do you use? You have any problems that may become a problem for us?" As the thought occurred to him, he asked, "Are you the guild master of Fairy Tail?" Mira giggled softly at the questioning expression on his face. As Naruto heard a fight break out behind him, he ignored it until he heard someone yell, "Look out!" Mira responded, "No, he's just away on business at a guild master's meeting currently, so I'm kinda the second. Command." He turned to see a table flying toward the counter. Before he formed a blade in his hand and repeatedly cut the large table into pieces, he saw Mira begin to extend her arm. His words left only a flash behind as the pieces clattered to the floor. Naruto turned back to face Mira and heard her say, "Ah, another requipist, huh?" He cocked his head to the side, considering correcting her, but was startled by a loud crashing sound as the guild, which had been engaged in a fierce fight moments before, froze as the doors were kicked open. Naruto only noticed a huge horn that appeared to belong on a beast when he looked to see who had done it. He heard Mira complain behind him, "Great, she's back." Before the horn was put down, he began to wonder who it was. Then he saw it was the redhead girl, who also saw him as her eyes widened and gears clicked in her head as she rushed at him. He yelled, "Kuso," as he flipped off the stool and pushed off, landing his feet on the wall above the counter. He flew out the door, Urza following him as the guild paused in shock before trailing the two outside. Urza yelled, "Come back here so I can kill you," as her dependable sword swung over Naruto, causing her to bend in half. Naruto created a sword in his hand and thrust it forward to block a blow from Urza, who jumped back as Naruto got to his feet. "No, I happen to like my life where it is," Naruto yelled. Urza gave Naruto a fierce look while brandishing her sword in a combat gesture. "Now, can we talk this over civilly, or do I have to beat you first before you'll hear me out?" Naruto asked. As several guild members started to perspire heavily and Urza's ki increased even further, flooring some of the weaker guild members, Naruto yelled, "Fine, beating it is. That's fine with me. I needed a workout, hothead." Urza taunted, "Fine, you want to die today, that's fine with me. And what is up with your hair?" Naruto scowled, his own ki instead falling to below a civilian level as he appeared in front of Urza, his armor creaking slightly as his aura. Enforced fist slammed into her stomach. Naruto yelled, "Never diss the hair, it's cool, and you know it, now give me a decent fight, or I'm going back to enjoy a beer." Tin can. As Urza materialized inside his guard, her sword already poised to cut him to ribbons from sheer speed. More members were down by now, and Mira was grinning a little as her former self came out, relishing in someone calling Urza the names she used to call her. But as Urza swung her blade, Naruto swung a leg around and planted his own blade in the ground, his hand standing on it. Urza was sent rolling across the ground with a loud crack as the heel of his shoe struck her. As all but 3 members of the guild fell to the ground as a result of KI, Naruto yelled, "Oh, come on, I didn't do that hard. Now get back over here, or I'm going to come to you, and trust me when I say you don't want that. Don't underestimate me, metal tits." He saw that Mira was one of the 3 who were still standing, along with Gray and Natsu, the latter's fists burning because he wanted to battle both Urza and Naruto at this point. As he blocked Urza's sword, which knocked him to one knee, Naruto only had time to notice that a second sword had formed in his hand, its 2 blades forming an X. She nearly got cut by Naruto's follow-up attack, but that was all she did to him as he slung the blades back up, knocking her sword away. She slid back and suddenly started glowing as her clothes vanished, leaving Naruto speechless as new clothing appeared on her body. It appeared to be made primarily of metal and was shaped like a ball gown with a flare at the hips. Her upper chest was open, exposing a good amount of cleavage as Naruto stopped to clean his nose of blood, barely raising his blades to block her twin blades. Her torso piece was also made of metal, conforming to her body shape as her shoulders. Urza yelled, "Heaven's wheel armor," pushing Naruto back as he struggled to block her swords. At least that's how it appeared until he retaliated abruptly, one of his blades changing as her sword struck it, a coil of steel emerging from the blade to encircle hers. Naruto grabbed her and pulled her toward him, dropping his blades for a moment as he planted a knee in her stomach, knocking her out of breath as he put the foot back down. He then grabbed his 2 blades and put them back in their normal positions, planting them into the ground on either side of Urza's neck. "Give up already?" Naruto asked as she grunted and swung a foot up towards his crotch. However, Naruto repeated his previous move by standing on the 2 blades with his hand while rotating in midair. Urza formed multiple swords in the air and they flew at Naruto, forcing him to dodge them by releasing his swords. Urza continued to glare at Naruto as she rushed toward him, her two blades moving even more quickly as Naruto blocked each blow with one of his own. Naruto smirked at her as the blades dissolved into nothingness as they reformed in his hands. At last, Naruto was deceived by a feint when Urza dropped her blade and uppercut him with her gauntleted fist. Naruto felt blood enter his mouth and wiped it out, but Urza attacked again, tackling him to the ground while holding a hidden dagger to his neck. "Give up already?" Urza, exhausted from the protracted fighting, asked, her breath coming in short gasps. "What are your thoughts?" As his blades formed in his hands, Naruto tried to cut into Urza's stomach, but the redhead ducked by leaping away, allowing Naruto to get back up and attack first. This time, he started with a downward swing that Urza deflected to the side with one blade, and Naruto followed the momentum as he swung with the other blade at her side, the flat of her other blade pressing against her side as she held Naruto off, her other sword turning around to disable his hand while he was open. Her dress flaring outwards as Naruto struck with a straight thrust, his blade glinting dangerously in the light as Urza knocked it up, leaving Naruto open once again, but by now Urza had learned to recognize which openings were traps to lure her in, and which ones were just his arm bending unnaturally as Naruto smirked, his blade coming down like a scorpion's tail as Urza was forced to spin away from the attack. She smirked at her alleged victory before Naruto's other blade went another straight thrust, and she attempted to dodge to the side, only to be trapped when she noticed that his first blade had passed through her dress and pinned it to the ground. This was one of those traps, as she feinted forwards, only to have Naruto's blade strike downward like a bolt of lightning. When he heaved up breath after breath as he tried to regain oxygen into his body, she barely had time to dodge the thrust by leaning sideways and bending at the knees as she went under the strike, her fists flashing forwards to pummel his exposed stomach as he tried to regain oxygen into his body. Taking advantage of his distraction, Urza struck with a quick but powerful rising kick as she spun on her heels, her swords flashing forwards as they sliced into Naruto's flesh, the boy falling to the ground as Urza lost her ki. After the ki was gone, the guild woke up and cheered for Urza as she triumphantly stood over Naruto. However, Naruto struck like a snake, sinking his swords into her feet and shrunken them down to daggers. Naruto's daggers came loose as he snatched them from the air, the tiny silver weapons appearing as fractures in the air as he tore her armor with the tiny blades, and the redhead screamed in agony as he struck upwards, his aura enforced foot slamming her mouth shut as she was lifted off the ground. Pieces of her armor flew off her as she hit the ground, leaving numerous tiny holes across her torso, and Naruto grinned again. Despite his taunting, Naruto was growing weary of the fight, but he persevered as Urza got up again to continue the battle. "Never assume I'm down for the count, like I would be beaten so easily by a half-rate swordswoman like you," Urza said. "Who are you calling half-rate? You're bleeding more than I am." Naruto's perspiration stopped. "Yes, and because of your sluttish armor, the majority of it came from my nose," Naruto thought as he glanced at Urza, who was grinning slightly. She then charged at him, thrusting both of her blades, and Naruto ducked, strafing the redhead's blows as she attempted in vain to strike him, but every time she came near, he would turn his body and dodge the attacks with the least amount of force, making the girl lose her temper as she attempted ever more brave maneuvers, until he slammed a foot down on one blade, embedding it in the ground, his blade flashing upwards to knock hers free from her grasp, an accomplishment in and of itself. Urza ducked, unaware of the trick until it was too late, but Naruto's hand shot out and grabbed her spinning blade as he swung his dagger high once it was in the air. He then placed one dagger tip at her neck, her own sword behind her head to prevent her from fleeing, and the final dagger caught between his toes, the point of which drew blood on her bare stomach. Urza briefly displayed signs of distress before Naruto noticed her fingers moving like a puppeteer's, and he remarked, "Checkmate, you almost had me, and by almost, I mean never. This battle is not yet finished." As Naruto twisted his wrist to reveal the flat of the blade behind him, Urza spat out, "I won't lose to you. I refuse to let someone like you into our guild." Behind him, a collection of roughly 50 swords were floating in midair thanks to Urza's abilities bestowed upon her by that damned armor. "Well, I guess it's not quite over yet, but there is one significant distinction between our circumstances. Can you kill as I will? You know I will." As he pressed the dagger blade closer to her neck, a single drop of blood formed as her finger twitched. The Oromancer smirked as the swords flew at Naruto. He spun on his heel, a move he had practiced with Haku when she was still alive, and in remembrance of her father. Figure, Haku had allowed Naruto to make duplicates of his signature sword for use in combat, provided he retained the name. Within seconds of Urza's attack, Two blades formed, and Naruto had to use aura to strengthen his arms to support the blades with one hand, but he managed to do so while performing another task he had been working on perfecting. The daggers in his hands vanished, and Urza's sword flew away from the battle. Zabuza's Kabikirabocho was in each hand, one with red cracks across the blade, the other glowing a whitish blue as mist poured off it, and each sword released its remaining energies as it spun, forming a huge twister. Dual wield. Flame. Carving and frozen blades. The invading swords were frozen and melted by Naruto's shout as the twister turned the attack on Urza. Urza barely avoided the blow before Naruto exploded from the twister, his blades glowing blue and red, respectively, as he struck down with the red one. Urza lifted a sword to block, but a flaming pillar emerged from the impact, and Natsu's face turned white as he ate the flames. Gray kicked the downed mage, and his pants got wet. Whoops. Probably ought to have forewarned him before he made that attempt. As Urza hit him, Naruto remarked, "These flames are extremely rich in magic. It would be like a child drinking an extra large espresso." The boy blocked with his blue blade, and Urza's blade was covered in ice as she smashed it against the ground, causing the ice to stick to the blade. She didn't anticipate the two lines of ice and fire racing at her while she was helpless in the air, nor did she anticipate Naruto appearing above her, his twin blades coming down, smashing into her crossed blades, the red melting through the ice, the blue freezing them, and Urza's blades breaking as Naruto's blades cut into her shoulders. Then, in their customary dance, Naruto retaliated, both of his blades coming down, Urza backflipping away as the blades cut into the ground like butter. She did not, however, allow him to get away with first stabbing him multiple times with her dagger, the small blade unable to injure him in the end, but the wounds would be annoying. She then re-equipped into her Flame Empress armor as she held back the flames being produced by his sword, and as Naruto's eyes widened, she flung them back, using the flames, and he blocked them by stabbing his blue blade into the ground, a massive ice wall halting the attack just as water started to form from the extreme heat. A few seconds later, an army of frozen spears emerged, all of which were aimed at Urza, who swung and danced frantically to either avoid or destroy all of the spears that were meant to impale her. The attack finally came to an end when Naruto switched back to his basic blades because his magical energy was running low. Urza also switched back to her chest plate and held a sword in each hand. Then, after 5 seconds of panting, the two charged at each other. Naruto leading the dance of blades as he entered from the side. Urza's blade halting the attack, and she pushed back against it, knocking the sword wide as one of hers struck forwards like a snake, the tip finding its target as Naruto gritted his teeth, only to take the hit and strike with one of his own, shortening his sword to fit the small space as he dragged it across Urza's smooth stomach, leaving a half-foot cut across her smooth stomach, not very deep, but painful with each twist of her hips, a vital aspect of swordplay. Following that, each mage withdrew to search for weaknesses in the other's defense. This time, Urza took the lead as she attempted a thrust, but Naruto turned his body sideways and sent his swords flying in unison to overwhelm her. Naruto was rewarded for his attack with another quiet scream as his blades sank into the redhead's soft side, one of the few parts of her body that wasn't covered in calluses. Striking back, the pommel of his sword struck her jaw, causing the girl to wince as she worked her jaw. Urza brought blood with them as she dragged the blades away, stabbing at Naruto's knee as the boy attempted to move, only for the sword to clip his kneecap, the sturdy metal undoubtedly bruising the bone as Naruto saw spots flash across his vision. Following the attack, however, Naruto turned red as he charged her, planting his knee into her gut as he hit her exposed back with his elbow, pincering her between the hard joints. She retaliated by swinging her sword, the flat of the blade smashing into his left ankle as he crumpled to the ground, with a quick application of ice magic keeping him steady. She was in a position where she could fully utilize her upper body strength, though, as she head-butted his crotch, the boy yowling in pain as he released her, and then his foot swung out faster than ever into her injured side, causing the girl to cry out in pain as well. Naruto continued the assault by slamming his shoulder into her, knocking her back, and a series of kicks that slammed into her midsection, preventing her from catching her breath. He finished his attack by grabbing her red hair, pulling her down, and slamming his knee into her face. The girl swore she felt some teeth come loose, but her nose somehow remained intact. She then charged him as Naruto inhaled, and he was caught off guard as she ducked into his guard, her head coming up to smash into his chin as Naruto staggered back, barely avoiding serious injury as her sword tip sliced into his chin, the blood spraying up into his eye as he attempted to wipe it away, using his limited view to protect himself from Urza's quick strikes. After fighting for so long, how do you manage to have so much energy left? After blocking a particularly impressive move, Naruto muttered as her pommel struck the side of his skull, causing the bone to flare with heat that was probably blood. Returning fire, Naruto's sword flashed around, somehow finding ways to block her attacks, and she replied, "Because I'm fighting for my friends." Naruto thrust his own sword at her, but the girl easily avoided his blows. When Naruto's sword reached for the redhead's bare leg, she looked up to taunt him, but his forehead struck her face as her nose broke and blood poured from the wound. She staggered backwards, her rage taking over as she punched him in the face, his own nose giving way under her strength. "Oh, is that all? Nice to know we're fighting for the same thing," Naruto responded. Urza decided to finish this fight, so she gathered the last of her magical reserves and put on one more armor. Then, Naruto leapt into the air, landing in a double kick as she blocked with both blades, sending the boy flying high. Black wing armor. Urza yelled as two wings appeared behind her, causing the girl to take off and sprint towards Naruto in midair as he was bewildered and disoriented. Naruto was the only one who wasn't confused. In fact, he was prepared for her because he knew she would attempt to exploit his vulnerability in midair. As he saw her quickly ascending, he concentrated most of his remaining energy and felt the familiar blue aura envelop him as he performed another new trick he was currently honing. When he held his hand in front of himself, a tiny sphere started to form as Naruto directed his ice magic into it, causing it to turn glaringly white. As he reared back and struck Urza's black sword with his attack, his arm was covered in frost. Aura sphere. Ice. As he broke through her attack, Naruto yelled, expecting a hard landing as the ground cratered beneath them and a huge dust cloud was kicked up from the high. Speed impact. Their combined weight carried them down towards the ground. Urza was frozen in place inside the giant ball of pure ice, and Naruto was sitting on top of it, resting his head on one knee and pressing his injured one against the cold to soothe it. The guild had crept forward to peek over the edge of the crater, expecting to see Urza standing triumphantly over Naruto. "Well, I had fun with that." As the guild sweat dropped, Naruto remarked, "Perhaps now I can get serious." Mira smiled her signature smile and noted that she would inform Master of this development.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.